Chapter 482. After releasing the blood brew grapevine, Lin Yuan realized that the blood brew grapevine was quite greedy. Originally, the blood brew grapevine didn't have that many roots, so it couldn't be used. However, in order to occupy all the eyes of relinquish, the blood brew grapevine had actually grown many young roots. After the young roots grew out, they entered every eye of relinquish together with the old roots. After ensuring that all the eyes of relinquish were occupied, the blood brew grapevine started to wantonly absorb the flesh energy of the eyes of relinquish. Moreover, he realized that the blood brew grapevine had its own tricks during this process. The tip of the blood brew grapevine's newly grown roots were much sharper than the older ones, and had a layer of sharp, woodified keratin. With these new young roots, the blood brew grapevine would no longer need Lin Yuan's help. Instead, he could rely on himself to break through the eye of relinquish defenses. The boundless energy from the 29 eyes of relinquish was slowly absorbed into the blood brew grapevine's body. The blood brew grapevine began to sprout new branches from its vines. The blood brew grapevine was now twice as lush as it had been before, with a large number of young branches sprouting out of it. Lin Yuan did not care about this. The old man who had sold the blood brew grapevine must have trimmed all the branches and leaves of the blood brew grapevine. Only one main vine was left, ensuring that all the blood energy absorbed by the blood brew grapevine would be supplied to the bunch of blood brew grapes on the main vine. Compared to using this method to cultivate the blood brew grapevine to obtain the blood brew grapes, the blood brew grapevine was much stronger. Instead, Lin Yuan hoped that the blood brew grapevine would grow more vines and bear more blood brew grapes. Although this would undoubtedly increase the time it took for the blood brew grapevine to produce more blood brew grapes, the blood brew grapevine was still able to produce more blood brew grapes. However, not pruning the blood brew grapevine's branches would ensure that the blood brew grapevine wouldn't lose any energy. After all, the blood brew grapevine had absorbed a large amount of blood qi in order to grow these branches. If the mother of bloodbath wanted to advance to myth 3, it would need to eat countless blood brew grapes. Allowing the blood brew grapevines to produce blood brew grapes on such a large scale would allow the mother of bloodbath to eat to its heart's content every time the blood brew grapes were harvested. After observing for a while and finding that there were no problems, he stored red thorn and the blood brew grapevine in the leaf-shaped diamond face storage box. Lin Yuan had wanted to use the eye of relinquish to test the blood brew grapevine, so he had not let red thorn keep the eye of relinquish. However, Lin Yuan was going to use red thorn's eye of relinquish to nurture the blood brew grapevine. He still had to maintain the eye of relinquish on red thorn at the maximum value of 60. The extra eyes of relinquish were immediately placed by red thorn at the roots of the blood brew grapevine through the nibbling vines. He would nurture the blood brew grapevine. Although Lin Yuan's main fei was the gold eye/fantasy eye source sand, the silver eye/fantasy eye red thorn's compatibility focused on targeting groups, and it could only be of great use under certain circumstances. However, he was still used to maintaining his combat power at the maximum. He had to be in his best condition to face any possible unexpected situation. Even if he had experts like the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer protecting him, as well as the extreme token that the Moon Empress had given him, he would not be able to defeat them. However, Lin Yuan still felt that he should be in awe. The blood brew grapevine was able to absorb red thorn's eye of relinquish, and it was growing at a faster rate. Lin Yuan was finally relieved. He had to admit that he had saved a huge sum of money. The eyes of relinquish that red thorn had produced came from the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. The water world dimensional lifeforms were huge, and the price of each flesh was exceptionally cheap. It could be said that they were the cheapest flesh material in this world. Red thorn only relied on these gold water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh to save Lin Yuan the trouble of collecting Fei's essence blood. Lin Yuan had been worried about the gold water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh, but he had found a way to buy them on the way to the Indigo Azure Sea Market. The active period of the dimensional rift was about to arrive, and it could be said that he had an inexhaustible supply of water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh to trade with the Indigo Azure Guards. Lin Yuan planned to immediately make a deal with the middle-aged man from the Indigo Azure Guard after returning to the royal capital. It would be best to get a Diamond Fey storage box's Gold Water World dimensional lifeform's flesh as a backup. Lin Yuan suddenly thought that if the mother of Bloodbath knew that its blood brew grapes were processed from the Gold Water World dimensional lifeform's flesh when it ate them, it would probably feel nauseous. However, Lin Yuan felt that the raw materials were not important. What was important was that the blood brew grapes were crystal clear, juicy, and full. They contained the blood energy that the mother of Bloodbath needed the most. It was just like how Jinkala was a good partner for crops. Lin Yuan, who had been busy with other things, could finally get busy with his own matters. He took out the strategic-grade mountain-containing embryo that he had previously traded from the amber button-shaped Diamond Fey storage box. Lin Yuan looked at this mountain-containing embryo that was beating like an embryo. The more he looked, the more he felt that it looked like a potato. However, when he held it in his hand, the aura it emitted as it pulsed had a kind of virtuous bearing feeling. It was as if this small earth-yellow spherical object could lift 10,000 mountains. Or it could be said that the mountain-containing embryo gave Lin Yuan the feeling of a mountain itself. Lin Yuan let the amber button-shaped source sand on his cuff turn into a handful of gravel and wrapped it around the pulsing mountain-containing embryo. Lin Yuan could feel that the source sand's consciousness, which was not considered intelligent, transmitted an abnormal feeling of joy. It was obvious that the source sand could feel the mountain-containing embryo's benefits to itself. The mountain-containing embryo had the willpower of a mountain range that was constantly changing. Therefore, Lin Yuan let the source sand absorb the mountain-containing embryo. At the same time, he let the source sand's exclusive skill, metal consume manifestation, devour the day and night spirit silver and memorize the divine travel black swallow's feather shape. It turned into the gold-edged feather shape that grew when gray transformed into the heaven and earth fey, the sky-clouded crane. The gold-edged feather shape was far more complicated than the divine travel black swallow's feather shape. Therefore, it would take a period of time to complete the memory and all the changes. At the same time, the source sand also needed a period of time to consume and absorb the mountain-containing embryo's evolving ability. Therefore, Lin Yuan put away the source sand, which was wrapping and absorbing the mountain-containing embryo. Fourth update. Tipping and adding updates. End of this chapter. A middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face was pushing a wheelchair on a small path in the courtyard. The chill of the cold night in the morning had yet to dissipate, causing the skinny young man who was sitting on the wheelchair to be covered with a thick blanket. He also had a white fur coat draped over him. The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face bowed when he saw the skinny young man wrapped himself in a fur coat. "Third young master, we've been out for more than twice as long as usual. Why don't we go back after we finish this path?" The skinny young man who was sitting on the wheelchair was obviously in a good mood. "There's no hurry. After we finish this path, bring me to the plum forest at the back to take a look. It hasn't snowed in Indigo Azure City for a long time. Without the white snow as a contrast, the red plum blossoms don't look as stunning. Instead, the usually unremarkable white plum blossoms have a special flavor when you look at them." The man with 3 scars on his face heard this and knew that the third young master's mood could not be described as ordinary good. The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face obviously knew why the third young master was in such a good mood. "Third young master, there was a heavy snowfall on the sea last night, but it stopped after a short while." The skinny young man who was addressed as the third young master chuckled. "The snow stopped at the sea, but since it started elsewhere, how could it stop so easily? It's a pity that my legs are inconvenient, so I couldn't enjoy the show at the sea last night." The skinny young man suddenly asked, "Uncle Fu, even Nightmare 6 disappeared." "Uncle Fu, even Nightmare 6 has disappeared. Can second brother still sit still?" The middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face looked at the third young master's current state and didn't say anything. That was because the middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face knew that the third young master was immersed in his own world and had entered a state of soliloquy. Disturbing him at this time would result in serious trouble. Sure enough, the middle-aged man with 3 scars on his face heard the third young master suddenly sigh. "Sigh, second brother's legs aren't broken yet, so he naturally won't be able to sit still like me. But if second brother's legs are really broken, he won't be able to sit still even if he wants to. The middle-aged man who thought that the weather was sunny and warm suddenly felt the wind turn cold for some reason. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared out of thin air beside the skinny young man's wheelchair. He was dressed in a black robe, but his figure was much taller than ordinary people. It made the black robe look a little bulky. After the black figure appeared, he tilted his head and whispered in the skinny young man's ear. "Third young master, the news has been confirmed. Nightmare 6 is dead. In addition, I have already delivered the things that you asked me to deliver." The skinny young man sat in the wheelchair and stretched in satisfaction. His fingers tapped on the wheelchair's armrest, and he was obviously in a better mood than before. Lin Yuan had just come out of the sea and checked the ethereal jellyfish's speed of collecting floating silver strands. He found that the ethereal jellyfish's speed of collecting floating silver strands was much faster than expected. It had only been a night, and it had already collected about 1/3 of the floating silver strands. Therefore, by this time tomorrow, all the floating silver strands should be collected. Of course, Zhou Luo's contracted lava dragon lizard contributed a lot. After staying at sea for a day, Lin Yuan felt that spirit chi professionals were really very particular about the choice of contracted phase. Sea, land, and sky were the 3 domains. Most phase could only occupy one of them. It was rare for phase to occupy 2 or even a combination of 3. In different environments, different phase would be able to exhibit different strengths. For example, no matter how strong Lu Jie's insect queen's insect swarm was, it could only deal with the enemies at sea. Lu Jie could only rely on the lightning-gathering moths and hurricane owlet moths to attack the surface. As for the enemies under the sea, Lu Jie could only do nothing. Lin Yuan felt that if there was a chance in the future, apart from Red Thorn's source-type life form that could fight in the water, he should also contract a real aquatic fae. He should also form a contract with a true aquatic fae. Reward and update for otaku. Tipping more for otaku. Hehe, everyone is welcome to join the group to chat and discuss the plot. Hehe, everyone is welcome to join the group to chat and discuss the plot. Also, there will be a reward for guessing the name of Lin Yuan's first sacred source life form. If you answer correctly, you will enter the group and receive an item from Lin Yuan's Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. Seeking recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, rewards, and subscriptions. End of this chapter. Chapter 484. At that moment, Lin Yuan's phone suddenly rang. Upon seeing the caller, Lin Yuan could not help but feel a little surprised. After picking up the phone, Lin Yuan heard the other party speak first before he could speak. "I said that I can use any dimensional lifeform's flesh to exchange for water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. I shouldn't be able to do so in the future." The voice from the other end of the phone was very forthright with a hint of apology. Lin Yuan subconsciously replied, "It doesn't matter if you can't use any dimensional lifeform's flesh. It's fine if you can't use the flesh of any dimensional creatures. I have a lot of abyss dimensional creatures' flesh here." The middle-aged man on the other end of the line understood that Lin Yuan had misunderstood and quickly replied. "We use the flesh of water world dimensional creatures to exchange for the flesh of demon dimensional creatures, but that's because it's easier to sell the demon dimensional creatures' flesh into spirit materials. Now, our boss has found a way to exchange the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh for some basic supplies. So I'll have to break the exchange conditions I promised you before." Lin Yuan's brows immediately twitched wildly. He had finally found a way to exchange for water world dimensional lifeform's flesh, so he could not just break it like this. Not to mention letting Red Thorn evolve the ability to breathe underwater, just the mouth of Relinquish could operate at full strength and produce the eyes of Relinquish to nurture the blood brew grapevine. It needed to consume the flesh of hundreds of gold water world dimensional lifeforms every day. Those that had been exchanged previously were only enough for Red Thorn's mouth of Relinquish to operate at full strength for about a month. As Red Thorn became stronger, it would be matched with the acid secreted by the tongue of Relinquish that specialized in digesting water world dimensional lifeforms. Lin Yuan's demand for the gold water world dimensional lifeform's flesh was on a higher level. If the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh was gone, how could Lin Yuan bear it? Since the middle-aged man on the other end of the conversation was an Indigo Azure Guard, then the leader he mentioned must be the Indigo Azure Guard captain. Lin Yuan wondered if it was the one who had come to the deserted island with the 2 guard envoys yesterday. Since the Indigo Azure Guard captain wanted to exchange for basic supplies, Lin Yuan could also take out basic supplies. In fact, in addition to basic supplies, it was to be able to exchange for gold water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. Even if Lin Yuan had to take out some relatively precious supplies, he would be willing. As long as he could keep using the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh for consumption, it would be equivalent to doing the most economical thing. Uncle, I can take out more than just basic supplies. I can also take out high-quality materials and some rare spiritual materials to exchange for the flesh and blood of the water world dimensional lifeforms. As he spoke, he had some doubts. He needed the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh to be used as rations for Red Thorn. Why would others need something as smelly as the flesh of water world dimensional creatures? While Lin Yuan was puzzled, he didn't know that the middle-aged man on the other end of the line was even more puzzled. What was wrong with this world? There were actually people willing to take out high-quality resources and rare spiritual materials to exchange for the flesh of gold water world dimensional lifeforms. The rich really knew how to play. One had to know that their boss had found a channel to exchange the flesh and blood of dimensional creatures from the water world for basic supplies. To the Indigo Azure Guards, it was like celebrating the new year. One had to know that the Indigo Azure Guards would usually throw away countless pieces of water world dimensional creature flesh every year. The middle-aged man didn't feel that it was a waste to discard the water world dimensional creature's flesh and blood, but now that he thought about it, his heart ached. Lin Yuan soon heard the middle-aged man on the other end of the phone say straightforwardly. But if you want to reach a long-term cooperation, you can't buy as little as before. But if you want to reach a long-term cooperation, you can't buy as little as before. Why did he suddenly feel like he was holding a precious bargaining chip now that he was holding the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh and could start negotiating conditions? Now that I'm holding the flesh and blood of the water world dimensional creature, why do I suddenly feel like I'm holding a precious bargaining chip? I can begin negotiating conditions. In the future, every time I make an exchange, I'll use a diamond phase storage box as a unit. As for the price, we'll still follow the previous price, but I'll convert the price of the demon flesh according to the selling price on Star Web. The converted price of high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials will also be based on Star Web's price. Uncle, do you think it's okay? Based on the middle-aged man's words, the reason he had cancelled the previous transaction agreement was because of the price of the demon flesh and blood. The converted price of high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials will also be based on Star Web's price. What do you think, Uncle? The main reason he had cancelled the previous transaction agreement was the loss of value after exchanging the demon flesh and blood with the water world dimensional lifeforms. In addition to the loss of value, it would also take a lot of time to disassemble the demon flesh and blood in the abyss dimensional lifeforms. Now, he was willing to use high-quality materials and rare spiritual materials to exchange. It was equivalent to helping the middle-aged man offset the price difference in the middle, which he should be willing to do. In Lin Yuan's opinion, converting everything according to the Star Web price was a more cost-effective price for the middle-aged man. After all, the price of demon flesh and blood on Star Web was about 10% to 20% more expensive than its actual value. Sure enough, after Lin Yuan finished speaking, he immediately heard the middle-aged man's hearty laughter. Young brother is very particular. Lin Yuan could not help but feel embarrassed, and he heard how the middle-aged man addressed him. Previously, he had been calling him uncle, but now that the middle-aged man called him young brother, Lin Yuan could no longer call him uncle. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the middle-aged man speak again. Young brother, the active period of the dimensional rift is about to begin and will last for nearly half a year. Therefore, I can't provide any more transactions during this period. The next time I can provide a transaction should be half a year later. If you need a lot of water world dimensional lifeforms flesh and blood, it's best to complete the transaction with me before tomorrow. Otherwise, our boss may clear out all the dimensional lifeforms flesh and blood in exchange for some ordinary materials that can improve the phase diet. Lin Yuan immediately expressed his agreement after hearing the middle-aged man's words. Then I might as well go to Indigo Azure City to find you now. It just so happens that I have an empty diamond phase storage box here. I can fill it up during the transaction. After agreeing on a location with the middle-aged man, Lin Yuan hung up the phone. At that moment, a rather serious voice suddenly came from behind the middle-aged man, whose face was smiling like an old chrysanthemum. Kid, why are you smiling so wretchedly? I've been listening to you laughing for a minute at the door. Why? Have you found a girlfriend since you were single? Chapter 6, More Tips for Otaku. End of this chapter. Chapter 485. When the middle-aged man heard that, his face immediately wrinkled. Guard Captain, shouldn't you assign me a girlfriend since I'm so hardworking? The Indigo Azure Guard Captain was the man in blue armor that Lin Yuan had seen on the deserted island that day. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard the middle-aged man's words, he immediately slapped his shoulder and scolded jokingly. Little brat, I've been single for 5 more years than your mother did, and I'm still single. You still want me to assign you a wife? Hurry up. Kid, don't talk nonsense. Come with me to sell all the water world dimensional lifeforms flesh we've stored. When the middle-aged man heard that, he reached out to grab his buzz cut and said with a sneaky smile, Guard Captain, I seem to have negotiated a big deal. Guard Captain, I seem to have negotiated a huge deal. Half of the gold water world dimensional creature's flesh can't be used to exchange for ordinary supplies. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard that, he went up and gave the middle-aged man a kick. If you have something to say, say it quickly. I've been busy these 2 days and haven't had any sleep at all. I'm not in the mood to see you show off. After being kicked, the middle-aged man hurriedly told the Indigo Azure Guard Captain about the deal he had just made with Lin Yuan on the phone. The Indigo Azure Guard Captain frowned slightly. It was not that such a deal was bad, but it was too good. It was so good that it was somewhat unreal. If this deal could be reached, then they could exchange for basic supplies. The Indigo Azure Guard would be exchanging all the water world dimensional lifeforms flesh for a large number of basic supplies, premium supplies, and rare spiritual ingredients before the dimensional rift arrived. However, such a good deal had to be properly investigated before the transaction. The Indigo Azure Guard Captain had originally come to find the middle-aged man to trade the water world dimensional lifeforms flesh. Now that there was an additional buyer, it was just on the way. If there were rare spiritual ingredients and premium supplies to be exchanged, as long as one was not a fool, they would naturally exchange with rare spiritual ingredients and premium supplies first. How much of the gold water world dimensional lifeforms flesh does he want? When the middle-aged man heard that, he immediately answered with a grin. He said he wants to exchange for a diamond phase storage box. When the Indigo Azure Guard Captain heard that, he became even more surprised and could not help but fall into deep thought. When he came back to his senses and saw that the middle-aged man was still standing there, he immediately coughed and said, Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and get ready. In addition to the agreed gold water world dimensional life form flesh in the diamond phase storage box, prepare some more. The middle-aged man immediately responded, then hurriedly went to prepare. At this moment, the Indigo Azure Guard Captain was secretly planning to take a good look when the time came. What kind of exquisite resources and rare spiritual ingredients would the other party use to exchange for the gold water world dimensional lifeforms flesh in the diamond phase storage box? There were far too many fine materials and rare spirit materials. Some items that were in high demand would be snatched up crazily as soon as they appeared. However, if he encountered something that had a price but no supply, it would be the same as piling it up in his hands. If that was the case, it would be better to exchange for daily necessities. After hanging up, he told everyone that he was going to Indigo Azure City to trade. Upon hearing that, Endless Summer let the mother of Bloodbath continue to split the spiritual ingredients on Nightmare VI's body. Endless Summer turned into an abnormally exquisite pink-purple hydrangea-shaped flower and landed on the completely jade-textured rice bead at the hem of Lin Yuan's white spirit chi clothes. It made Lin Yuan's moon-white spirit chi clothes more vibrant and vivid. Obviously, Endless Summer planned to accompany Lin Yuan to Indigo Azure City at this time to deal with the Jing family's possible revenge. Lin Yuan also understood Endless Summer's intention. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, the Jing family probably had no intention of revenge at this time. Even as a veteran faction, the Jing family's loss of 2 Emperor-class experts was enough to be considered a serious blow. In addition, the 2 Spirit Guards envoys had also come to Indigo Azure City, and the Jing family had just lost manpower. At this time, he would have to guard against Indigo Azure City and the other 2 veteran forces of the Jing family and the other 3 families, who would kick him when he was down. The loss of 2 Emperor-class experts might not be enough to destroy the original situation of the 3 factions. However, it would make the Jing family the weaker party. This time, the mother of Bloodbath did not fight with Endless Summer for the opportunity to go to Indigo Azure City with Lin Yuan. Although the mother of Bloodbath was Lin Yuan's path protector, in terms of strength, the current Endless Summer was indeed stronger. The mother of Bloodbath had been injured before, but it didn't look like it was injured on the surface. Although outsiders could not see the injury on the surface, it still needed some time to recuperate. During the day, Lu Jia, Listen, and Zhou Luo had already gone to the sea to help the ethereal jellyfish collect floating silver threads. The ethereal jellyfish had found the floating silver threads. However, the ethereal jellyfish was unable to use its tentacles to gather and store the floating silver silk thread. Under Zhou Luo's dumbfounded gaze, Lu Jia and Listen began a new round of written tests. However, Zhou Luo did not understand why someone would use something so bitter as a bet. Would eating the platinum bitter gourd's flesh really not kill me? Lin Yuan thought about Indigo Azure City along the way. When he arrived at the agreed restaurant, Lin Yuan realized that the middle-aged man he had agreed to meet had not arrived yet. He sat at the side and looked at the scenery in the store. The store's business was very good. It was only morning, but there were already many customers ordering iced drinks, fruit plates, and baked cookies. Lin Yuan only ordered a cup of freshly squeezed watermelon juice and waited for the middle-aged man to arrive. He started to organize the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box that he had obtained from Jian Hanzhong. The leaf-shaped diamond face storage box originally had plenty of high-grade dimensional lifeforms flesh and some phase that he had harvested from the depths of the endless forest. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to empty Jian Hanzhong's pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box. It was used to store the gold water world dimensional lifeforms flesh in the diamond face storage box. Lin Yuan had not checked Jian Hanzhong's pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box before. Now that he checked, Lin Yuan realized that Jian Hanzhong had not hoarded many resources. Most of the resources must have been spent on the cold snow pine. However, Lin Yuan quickly realized that he had thought wrong. Jian Hanzhong was really an elegant person. The diamond face storage box had always been used to store resources, but Jian Hanzhong had forcefully created the feeling of Morbius Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. It did not have the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone's function. However, within the range of the diamond face storage box, Jian Hanzhong had made it look like a small garden. 7th update. Tipping and updating for the house. End of this chapter. Chapter 486. There were hundreds of rare plants that had obviously been carefully pruned. Their branches and leaves were trimmed, and they were cultivated with great care. Lin Yuan used Morbius True data to check and found that many of the plants were very rare. However, most of them did not have any special functions. They were all supreme-grade plants that relied on their looks to make a living. Among them, 12 platinum vines green goat roses had already produced flower buds. The blue goat rose was a famous species of roses. A platinum/epic blue goat rose like this could be sold for nearly 10 million radiance dollars. As long as there was a wall, it did not matter how high it was. The Qingyang rose could grow along the wall and spread out on one side of the wall, forming a beautiful flower wall. The bowl-sized green double-petaled flowers could emit a fragrance that repelled mosquitoes and flies but could attract butterflies. Zhao Hanzhong had really put in a lot of effort to collect these plants. Supreme-grade plants were not things that could be bought with money. With so many of them gathered here, it would be impossible to collect them without a few decades. In the return from faraway manor, Hu Quan, who had become a Class 5 spirit craftsman, had already started to find a team of architects to start building the Dome Guild Club's base. The supreme-grade plants in Zhao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box could be used to decorate the Guild Club's base. At the same time, he could also build a small garden outside the 3,000-meter bamboo forest in the manor. He could then cultivate all of these supreme-grade plants in the garden. Lin Yuan continued to check the resources in Zhao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box and found that Zhao Hanzhong had stored a total of 50 source-type items in one box. This should be what Zhao Hanzhong had left after nurturing the cold snow pine and so many other supreme-grade plants. Then, Lin Yuan collected some spiritual ingredients that he felt were valuable and could not easily buy in the market. Lin Yuan planned to use the remaining resources in Zhao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box to exchange for the gold water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. Lin Yuan only had time to drink the iced watermelon juice after tidying up Zhao Hanzhong's diamond face storage box. Just as he drank a few mouthfuls of the iced watermelon juice, Lin Yuan saw the middle-aged man he had arranged to meet walking toward him. The middle-aged man had obviously noticed Lin Yuan's presence and was waving at him. Lin Yuan hurriedly got up and waved at the middle-aged man. After standing up, Lin Yuan realized that the middle-aged man was accompanied by someone he had seen before. It was the Indigo Azure Guard captain who had gone to the deserted island. Lin Yuan also waved at the Indigo Azure Guard captain. The Indigo Azure Guard captain was rather surprised to see Lin Yuan. He did not expect that this youth, who seemed to know the two guard envoys, but did not seem to know them, was actually the target of this transaction. Lin Yuan handed the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box to the middle-aged man sitting opposite him who had just ordered the peanuts and ice flowers. Take a look at the things inside. Can you exchange them for a diamond face storage box and a gold water world dimensional lifeform's flesh? Lin Yuan had already sorted out the resources here. In addition to the ones he had taken out, he had replenished 200 pots of silver/elite usnias after realizing that they were not enough. Lin Yuan had carefully calculated the value, and it would only be more or less. Of course, even if it was more, it would only be a little bit more. After the middle-aged man took a look, the peanuts and ice flowers that the waiter had just served fell out of his mouth. The Indigo Azure Guard captain frowned. This kid had a slip of the tongue and even wanted me to introduce a partner. Isn't this a scam? Immediately after, the middle-aged man handed the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box to the Indigo Azure Guard captain. The Indigo Azure Guard captain picked it up and felt that it was fortunate that he had not eaten the ice flowers. Otherwise, even if it did not fall out of his mouth, he would definitely choke. After carefully looking through it, the Indigo Azure Guard captain knew that the resources inside were definitely enough. Moreover, there were silver usnias, which could produce silver usnia vines continuously. It was definitely worth the money. Although there were also some items that were relatively difficult to sell. As long as silver usnias appeared in the market, they would be immediately snatched up by people. Hence, they were calculated according to the star web price. This was enough to show the sincerity of the youth wearing the strange mask. The Indigo Azure Guard captain simply asked the middle-aged man to fill the pine ball-shaped diamond face storage box. Then, he took out the extra platinum face storage box and the gold dimensional lifeform's flesh and handed it to Lin Yuan. He said, I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation again in the future. Lin Yuan did not reject the extra platinum water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. Just like how the middle-aged man and the Indigo Azure Guard captain did not reject Lin Yuan's additional premium resources and rare spiritual ingredients. After this transaction, Lin Yuan was finally at ease. He would no longer need to worry about the water world dimensional lifeform's flesh. At the same time, it was equivalent to Lin Yuan saving a large sum of money that even he would feel the pinch of spending. Along the way, there were no accidents. Lin Yuan and Endless Summer once again returned to the deserted island. The mother of Bloodbath had more or less split the dream-eating bat. When the mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan return, it handed over all the resources it had split from the cold snow pine and the dream-eating bat. Look at my skills. Isn't it a lot better than when I split that old crow? Lin Yuan looked at the various spiritual ingredients that had been dissected so carefully and stored in crystal bottles according to their categories. He quickly gave the mother of Bloodbath a thumbs up. The mother of Bloodbath could be called the butcher's splitting hand, ruthless bone crusher, and tidying up little expert. The mother of Bloodbath accepted Lin Yuan's compliment with confidence. It stretched and took out its cell phone, waved it in front of Lin Yuan, and said, "My cell phone is out of battery. My phone is out of battery, lend me your phone. I want to share the Teppan seafood barbecue that I posted in my moments with the members of the food group." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan's brows twitched wildly as he handed over his cell phone. As the mother of Bloodbath continued to share Lu Jie's delicacies in the few food group exchanges, the mother of Bloodbath had been in. It had become the mysterious chef-worshipper fellowship. However, only those who had tasted Lu Jie's delicacies would understand the bliss of being able to taste Lu Jie's delicacies. Ever since Lu Jie's cooking had made him a picky eater, Lin Yuan no longer had that amazing feeling even when he went to the Spirit Food Pavilion to eat. In fact, Lin Yuan even felt that Lu Jie's cooking was more delicious. 8th update. Tipping for otaku. There were some problems with the settings of the elemental shellfish. Woo, woo, woo. I'm going to change it tonight. Thank you for pointing it out to me. Let's start with the 8th update today and make up for the rest. Button will continue to work hard. End of this chapter. Chapter 487. After handing the cell phone to the mother of Bloodbath, Lin Yuan dived into the sea again. He saw Listen, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo each wearing a gold-green oxygen sea anemone on their mouths. They were constantly rolling the floating silver threads that the ethereal jellyfish had found on the seabed into a ball. Just as Lin Yuan was about to help, Zhou Luo handed him several bundles of floating silver threads and pointed at the sea surface. Lin Yuan understood and floated up with Zhou Luo. Zhou Luo handed the bundles of floating silver threads to Lin Yuan and said, "Young master, we have a total of 47 bundles now. Young master, we now have a total of 47 groups. Each group of floating silver threads is at least 1,000 meters long." Lin Yuan took the bundles of floating silver threads and could not help but sigh. Just these floating silver threads were already a considerable amount of wealth. Apart from being used to shield spatial fluctuations, the floating silver was also used to make fey carriages. A large portion of it would also be used to make fey carriages or mixed in the walls of buildings to shield from detection. These floating silver threads should be quite useful in Hu Quan's hands after he brought them back. Seeing Lin Yuan take the bundles of floating silver threads, Zhou Luo's expression was a little complicated. "Young master, go to the island. You don't have to go into the sea. The three of us can completely keep up with young master's spatial phase speed in finding the floating silver. I often have no work to do." Lin Yuan listened to Zhou Luo's words and looked at Zhou Luo's expression. He immediately wondered if Lu Jie and Listen had started some strange competition again. Since he could not help much in the sea, Lin Yuan simply returned to the island. He let Lu Jie's insect queen produce a hurricane owlet moth to blow dry his clothes before returning to the tent. He was prepared to enter the Spirit Lock spatial zone again to see the changes that had occurred after the source sand absorbed the mountain-containing embryo after such a long time. Zhou Luo watched Lin Yuan go ashore before diving into the sea again. The more he interacted with Lin Yuan, the more Zhou Luo could find that Lin Yuan was different from the other young masters of the major factions. Lin Yuan did not have that kind of domineering arrogance. Zhou Luo could clearly feel Lin Yuan's equal and intimate attitude toward him and others. When he returned to the Spirit Lock spatial zone again, he suddenly realized that there was a very fragrant scent in the spirit lock spatial zone. He was very familiar with this smell. This smell was very similar to the smell of the silver stamen gold luster cassia flowers at the entrance of the Radiant Moon Palace. It was just that the fragrance was a little stronger than the silver stamen gold luster cassia. At the same time, in this rich fragrance, there was a trace of bitterness that was hard to detect. When he had been enhancing gray yesterday, he had discovered that the cinnabar sweet osmanthus, whose tree core had been dug out half a year ago, had vaguely grown flower buds that were not even the size of rice grains among the green leaves. However, Lin Yuan had been focused on gray yesterday and had not paid attention to the changes in the cinnabar sweet osmanthus. When he thought about it carefully, he remembered that although the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had recovered from its injuries, it did not seem to have produced flower buds. But now, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had actually bloomed a tree full of vermilion flowers that bent the branches. The flowers were so dense that they almost completely covered the green leaves. Looking from afar, the cinnabar sweet osmanthus would occasionally drop the most flourishing flowers. The flowers bloomed, but the flowers were already withered. The most flourishing flowers sprinkled on the pure white pure land of bliss. It was like a misty rain in April, with a breathtaking and gentle beauty. Come to think of it, when the pure land of bliss had been absorbing the world grace yesterday. The cinnabar sweet osmanthus had also obtained a lot of benefits from the pure land of bliss. Since the cinnabar sweet osmanthus had obtained benefits from the pure land of bliss, what about the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree? Immediately after, Lin Yuan took a closer look at the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree beside the cinnabar sweet osmanthus and found that a new branch had grown from Chinese bird nest. Although the branch didn't make Chinese nest bigger, it made the nest look more luxuriant than it had expected. Lin Yuan could vaguely feel that the speed at which the phoenix perching Chinese parasol tree conducted the golden energy toward the bird nest seemed to be slightly faster than before. However, this increase was not very obvious if one did not observe it carefully. The wind speed rapid antelope, which Lin Yuan had appointed as the spirit lock spatial zone's housekeeper, was constantly manipulating the wind elements to form a cyclone. He diligently collected the cinnabar-colored flower petals that fell on the pure land of bliss. Upon sensing that Lin Yuan had entered the spirit lock spatial zone, the wind speed rapid antelope quickly ran toward Lin Yuan. It hopped twice in front of Lin Yuan and was abnormally friendly. The wind speed rapid antelope's feelings for Lin Yuan were different from the other phase that Lin Yuan had nurtured but not contracted. When the wind speed rapid antelope was on the brink of death, it could only watch as Lin Yuan saved it like a god of salvation. And to live in such a nice place. Therefore, to a certain extent, the wind speed rapid antelope's gratitude and closeness to Lin Yuan was already comparable to Chimey and Genius' closeness to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan rubbed the wind speed rapid antelope's little head. Chapter 488. The wind speed rapid antelope's action seemed to be hinting for Lin Yuan to help it hang the wind elemental heavenly maiden grade pearl around its neck. Lin Yuan smiled and crushed the wind elemental heavenly maiden grade pearl, indicating for the wind speed rapid antelope to eat it. The wind speed rapid antelope's current intelligence was just like the clingy pets that people raised in his previous life. Even if you make some movements, he will be able to understand the meaning behind your movements. However, if he were to use language to communicate with the wind speed rapid antelope, it wouldn't be able to understand. However, Lin Yuan still spoke softly to the wind speed rapid antelope, just like how he spoke to Genius and Chimey. Little fella, with your body's current condition, you can consume an elemental pearl approximately every 3 days. From now on, I will feed you one every 3 days. The wind speed rapid antelope saw that Lin Yuan had crushed the good stuff and handed it to it. She didn't understand why Lin Yuan was so wasteful to let her eat such a good thing. However, the wind speed rapid antelope still happily licked all the elemental pearl powder in Lin Yuan's palm clean. Lin Yuan shook his head helplessly. Is this little fellow afraid of wasting the elemental pearl powder, or is it washing its hands for me? This was simply too clean. Since the wind speed rapid antelope was innately weak, it did not receive proper nurturing when it was young. Therefore, he decided to rely on the acquired resources to push the wind speed rapid antelope up. To the current Lin Yuan, priceless treasures were easy to obtain. However, the wind speed rapid antelope was considerate and sensible. It relied on its instincts to tidy up the spirit lock spatial zone in an orderly manner. If he were to miss this opportunity, it would be difficult to find another one. Even if he could meet again, he would never be fated with this little fellow in front of him. With the pleasant surprise of the cinnabar sweet osmanthus blooming, Lin Yuan went closer to take a look at the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia parasitizing the cinnabar sweet osmanthus. With a glance, Lin Yuan realized that the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia had now become gold X from gold 8. A long, thin tassel grew out of it. Upon seeing this fine tassel, Lin Yuan knew that it was a sign that the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia was about to bear fruit. Lin Yuan was looking forward to the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia bearing fruit. Once the cinnabar osmanthus haworthia's fruit matured, it would strengthen his spiritual energy, which he had not dared to use easily. Although it was not much of an enhancement, it would allow him to choose a fae without having to be so strapped for spiritual energy. You can also have more choices. After arranging everything, Lin Yuan let the source sand at the cuff of his sleeve turn into the form of gravel. With this look, he found that the mountain-containing embryo was indeed smaller than before. However, the source sand's quality remained the same. It hadn't been upgraded from Fantasy I to Fantasy II. However, Lin Yuan could clearly sense that the source sand had undergone tremendous changes. Previously, if the source sand's gravel had been separated, it would only be the pile of gravel that the source sand had transformed into and the gravel that the source sand had produced by creating sand underground. But now, other than the ball of sand that the source sand had transformed into and the grains of sand that it had produced, the source sand didn't seem to be able to move at all. Lin Yuan felt that the source sand was now able to produce a type of extremely dense gravel. Although Lin Yuan's control over the high-density gravel was not as good as the source sand's own gravel, it was far superior to the source sand's mass production of gravel. Although there was not a lot of gravel, it could completely cover everything within 3 meters of Lin Yuan. This undoubtedly brought Lin Yuan a great surprise. The reason for such a change was because the source sand had absorbed the mountain-containing embryo's evolution ability. Lin Yuan planned to name the Midland dense gravel the guard gravel. Due to the gravel's existence, Lin Yuan's close-range defense and close-range attack abilities were greatly enhanced. At that moment, Lin Yuan truly felt how terrifying it was to nurture a fae with superior resources and how terrifying the fae's enhancement could be. Lin Yuan was also very glad that he hadn't made do with spiritual ingredients that could be substituted in order to improve his fantasy breed fae's quality. Lin Yuan took an earth elemental heavenly maiden grade elemental pearl produced by the thick earth elemental shellfish and threw it into the source sand. The source sand immediately transported this earth elemental heavenly maiden grade pearl to the side of the mountain-containing embryo. Then, it rotated the gravel, causing the earth elemental heavenly maiden grade elemental pearl and the mountain-containing embryo to collide. Lin Yuan suddenly felt that his elemental source-type source sand's soul essence wouldn't be that of an old man, right? When it was only a gold/fantasy breed, it already knew to rotate the pearl with its chaotic intelligence. What would happen when it matured? Lin Yuan had never given the source sand a name. Now, he felt that since the source sand liked to rotate the pearls so much, why not call it source sand string? Lin Yuan wanted to use the earth elemental heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls produced by the thick earth elemental shellfish to temper the source sand's elemental body. The sand element was a variant of the earth element, and they had the same origin. Since the source sand was an elemental source-type life form, it would be extremely beneficial for it to be tempered by such pure earth elements. It could also help the source sand increase its grade. After sensing the source sand's absorption speed, Lin Yuan knew that if this continued, the source sand would be able to consume 2 earth elemental heavenly maiden grade elemental pearls every day. After accumulating for a long time, it would consume 60 pearls in a month, and 720 pearls in a year. How many people could afford this kind of consumption? Even if they could afford it, how many people would be willing to invest so many resources for their faes? Nurturing a fae was a process of using resources to roll a snowball. Although the investment and return might not be proportional, it was impossible to make the fae stronger during the evolution process without any investment. It was obviously an extremely unrealistic thing. This was also the reason why a person with a stronger foundation would be able to nurture a stronger fae, excluding their own talents. However, Lin Yuan was very willing to spend the resources to nurture faes. Morbius was Lin Yuan's contracted fae, and its exclusive skill, Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, gave Lin Yuan the confidence to carry out such consumption. The number of heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls consumed by the source sand was just a drop in the ocean compared to the number produced by the thick earth elemental shellfish. Lin Yuan started to enhance the silver usnias in the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone. This spirit chi professional couldn't rely on absorbing the spirit chi in the world and could only rely on the spirit chi from the enhanced fae to increase their grade. It was simply too difficult. As soon as Lin Yuan exited the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone, he immediately sensed the ethereal jellyfish's spiritual wave. Lin Yuan's pupils constricted. Lin Yuan knew that the secret hidden in this nearshore sea could finally be completely revealed at this moment. Second update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 489. When Lin Yuan got out of the tent, he saw Listen sitting there with wet clothes and constantly stuffing dry rations into his mouth. Obviously, Listen had exhausted his stamina while collecting the floating silver threads under the sea. It seemed that the winner between Listen and Lu Jia was clear at a glance. Lin Yuan walked to Listen's side, took out a bag of fresh fruits from the amber button-shaped diamond face storage box, handed it to Listen, and he then asked, "What did you and big brother Lu bet on this time?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Listen answered with a bitter face. "It's the pulp of the platinum bitter melon. I originally only bet on this. But I added a condition of not drinking water for 3 hours after eating the bitter melon pulp." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan reached out and patted Listen's shoulder with a face full of sympathy. It was fine to eat the platinum bitter melon pulp, but it was just to experience the feeling of being so bitter that it made one want to die. If one drank a few cups of sweet fruit juice or nectar brewed from the cinnabar sweet osmanthus immediately after eating it, that extreme bitterness that made one want to die would be quickly eliminated. However, not drinking water for 3 hours after eating was too much. What kind of godly condition was this? What was the difference between this and a girlfriend asking to play for 3 days and 3 nights? That extreme bitterness did not need anything to be suppressed, and it simply could not be dispersed. Wasn't this the same as having to experience the feeling of being bitter for 3 hours in a row? Even if Lin Yuan had experienced the bitterness of life, he did not dare to imagine what it was like. Lin Yuan saw the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer each holding a mobile phone and fiddling with it. The two suzerain/myth breed fays had already displayed the realm of hands never leaving the mobile phone to the extreme. However, the mother of Bloodbath was using its mobile phone to share Lu Jia's food in the food group, attracting a group of praises. As for Endless Summer, people were frantically recommending all kinds of accessories in various accessories exchange groups. In this regard, Lin Yuan felt that it was simply great. As long as Endless Summer did not dye her hair, anything was good. When the mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan leave the tent, its mouth twitched. Was there anyone more of a homebody than Lin Yuan in this world? It was not easy to come to the sea, but he did not come out to see the scenery and enjoy the sea breeze. All the people on Star Web were fat homebodies. However, the thin otaku drank less cola than the fat otaku. What was the difference between a skinny otaku and a fat otaku? The mother of Bloodbath stood up and was about to call Lin Yuan to move around on this deserted island and then go a little farther into the sea to catch some sea crabs. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath saw Lin Yuan jump into the sea. Thus, the mother of Bloodbath could only sit down again and continue playing with her phone. But this time, the mother of Bloodbath did not chat in the gourmet group. Instead, he opened the search engine and searched. What's with the skinny otaku suddenly liking sports and taking the initiative to swim? The answer at the top of the list read frowny face. The skinny otaku must have gone underwater to look at the beauties. How dare someone ask such a stupid question? Eat some retarded pills to nourish yourself. Just as the mother of Bloodbath was about to get angry, it immediately thought of the words looking at beauties. Naturally, Lu Jia and Zhou Luo were not beauties. However, their appearances were also quite outstanding. If that's the case, what's with the skinny otaku going to the sea to look at handsome guys? The mother of Bloodbath suddenly felt that the human world was really difficult to understand. Male spiders were easier to understand. It was just that male spiders did not know how to cook. Pass. When Lin Yuan reached the sea, he saw Lu Jia standing on the seabed and constantly entangling the floating silver thread. Meanwhile, Zhou Luo was commanding the lava dragon lizard to constantly use its body to hit a seabed mound that was obviously several times harder than the other seabed rocks. When Lin Yuan got close, he saw that the lava dragon lizard's impact on the seabed mound was not obvious. He immediately summoned Red Thorn and let Red Thorn's Ortet spawn a large patch of nibbling vines under the sea. The nibbling vines started to nibble at the seabed mound through the sharp teeth on the vines. Half an hour later, the nibbling vines gnawed out many holes and the lava dragon lizard kept hitting it. The seabed that was holding down the last floating silver thread was directly broken by the impact. Just as Lu Jia pulled out the last floating silver thread, the space in the sea suddenly trembled violently. During the trembling, a huge hole tore open in the space. The huge hole sucked Lin Yuan, Lu Jia, Zhou Luo, as well as Red Thorn the lava dragon lizard, which were close to Lin Yuan, into the open portal. Immediately after, this open door lost the spatial magnetic ore's first layer of protection and the floating silver thread's second layer of concealment. After sucking Lin Yuan and the others in, it broke through the sea surface and formed a huge dimensional rift. Immediately after, something seemed to have happened inside the massive dimensional rift, causing it to tremble all of a sudden. A layer of violent spatial energy gushed out of the huge black and red rift. This layer of violent spatial energy seemed to be trying to pull, wanting to tear the already open dimensional rift's entrance even bigger. The moment the dimensional rift suddenly appeared and Lin Yuan and the others' auras disappeared, the mother of Bloodbath flashed and arrived at the seabed where Lin Yuan, Lu Jia, and Zhou Luo had disappeared. The mother of Bloodbath saw the ethereal jellyfish using its soft tentacles to fiddle with the space. It wanted to drill into this dimensional rift that seemed to have a layer of restriction. However, the moment the ethereal jellyfish's soft tentacles touched the dimensional rift's restriction, they were sliced into pieces by the dimensional rift. However, the ethereal jellyfish did not seem to feel any pain and desperately tried to squeeze its body in. Upon seeing this, the mother of Bloodbath stopped the ethereal jellyfish and immediately activated the blood law that it controlled. However, the condensed blood energy in its hands did not swing down on this dimensional rift that seemed to have a layer of restriction. Endless Summer said with an abnormally ugly expression. How can there be a controlled Pinnacle Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift here? What happened inside the Water World Dimensional Rift's biological space? It's actually raising the dimensional rift's grade. The mother of Bloodbath's usually expressionless face seemed to reveal a trace of panic and endless self-blame for the first time in its life. The mother of Bloodbath hugged the ethereal jellyfish tightly in its arms. Its mind unconsciously thought of how that youth had gone all out under the earth cleansing. He had allowed it to pass through the Myth 2 earth cleansing and transform into a human form. It was clearly Lin Yuan's path protector, but in a dangerous situation, it had lost the vigilance that a path protector should have. When it went out, it should always follow Lin Yuan closely and go into the sea with him. If it could go into the sea with Lin Yuan, then when this dimensional rift suddenly opened, it would be able to react immediately. Lin Yuan would also not be sucked into this dimensional rift. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 490. When a dimensional rift evolved, it was equivalent to sealing the original dimensional space and forming an independent spatial environment that was constantly tearing and expanding. Even if the mother of Bloodbath used all its strength, it could not tear open the evolving dimensional rift. Even if someone had the ability to tear open this evolving dimensional rift, the mother of Bloodbath would rush up and desperately stop that person. If the dimensional rift was torn open during the evolution process, the spatial energy inside the dimensional rift would be chaotic and collapse. At that time, Lin Yuan would be torn into pieces in the chaotic collapse of the spatial energy, and he was destined to have no chance of survival. The ethereal jellyfish that Lin Yuan had contracted was the only thing that could determine whether Lin Yuan was alive or not. The mother of Bloodbath's self-reproach expression did not diminish, but it suppressed its panic. The mother of Bloodbath soared into the air and returned to the deserted island. It took out the cell phone that it had previously asked Lin Yuan for. As a myth-breed fae, the mother of Bloodbath's hand that was holding Lin Yuan's cell phone was trembling. The mother of Bloodbath had clearly lived for a long time. However, the traces of life left behind in all the previous times were not as many as the traces left behind in this half a year. From the first time they met, scenes flashed in its mind. Never giving up. In the end, its entire life was integrated into the return from faraway manor, which had long been treated by the mother of Bloodbath as its home. Arachnid fays had always been cruel, but once a cruel and cold-blooded arachnid determined something, then, it would often be more sincere. The mother of Bloodbath forced itself to stop thinking. It lowered its head and looked at Lin Yuan's cell phone. The mother of Bloodbath took a deep breath and dialed a number on Lin Yuan's cell phone. The mother of Bloodbath understood that it could not do anything now. However, that person might have a way. Leaning Moon Mountain. Gulls and herons circled, and butterflies fluttered. The silver stamen gold luster cassia emitted an elegant osmanthus fragrance that spread in front of the Radiant Moon Palace. Today, the Radiant Moon Palace was a little different from usual. 4 tea attendants stood at the entrance of the Radiant Moon Palace. Their expressions were abnormally serious, but there was a trace of anticipation in their serious expressions. In the inner palace of the Radiant Moon Palace, Mystic Moon stood by the table, holding a jade pumpkin teapot. She looked at the moon's shadow corridor inside the inner palace. She looked at the moon's shadow corridor inside the inner palace. At that moment, the pond full of suzerain lotus fays in the rear hall was emitting haze of various colors. This caused the inner palace to look like a fairyland shrouded in multicolored light. There were a few spirit siphon goldfish in the pool, which had been upgraded from platinum to diamond at some point in time. Their peony-like fishtails occasionally popped out of the water. Mystic Moon, Moon, and Mystic Moon. Xian Yu's mind was clearly not on the jade pumpkin teapot in her hand. Thus, when Xian Yu poured the tea out of the jade pumpkin teapot, she accidentally spilled some on the table. Xian Yu hurriedly placed the jade pumpkin teapot on the table and picked up a handkerchief to clean up the spilled water stains. To Mystic Tu, the Mystic Moon's worried expression. Worry appeared in Mystic Moon. Of Moon. The worry in Xian Yu's eyes deepened as she muttered softly. This is the third time the Moon Empress has attempted to break through that realm in the past few years. Not only did she fail the previous 2 times, but she was also severely injured. This is the third time the Moon Empress is trying to reach that realm in the past few years. At that moment, the Moon Empress' cell phone rang. Mystic Moon did not check it immediately. The Moon Empress' cell phone rarely rang, and it was mostly Lin Yuan. However, due to the Moon Empress' personal suggestion to change the Radiance 100 Sequences test, the Radiance 100 Sequences test had been changed recently. Therefore, the Radiance Sacred Hall had more opportunities to contact the Moon Empress. Mystic Moon was one of the Moon Empress' moon envoys. However, Mystic Moon would not pick up the Moon Empress call. If that was the case, it would be considered as overstepping his boundaries. However, after the ringing stopped, it rang 3 more times in a row. It seemed like there was something urgent. Mystic Moon took a look and found that it was Lin Yuan's cell phone number. Mystic Moon could not help but frown. These 3 consecutive calls were a little urgent. Could it be that Lin Yuan had encountered something urgent? The Moon Empress was in seclusion. If Lin Yuan really had something urgent, Mystic Moon could take care of it. Hence, Mystic Moon picked up the call. However, when Mystic Moon picked up the call, he heard a strange and pleasant female voice coming from the other end. It was not Lin Yuan's voice. However, after hearing the content, Mystic Moon's face turned gloomy. In an instant, a violent spiritual wave spiraled around Mystic Moon's body. Just as this terrifying spiritual pressure appeared, a layer of bright silver patterns appeared on Xian Yu's forehead, cheeks, and even her palms, which were covered by the silver robe. At the same time, Mystic Moon's black eyes turned dark silver. Mystic Moon's usually gentle and clear voice was also tainted with a hint of worry and killing intent. Wait for me to inform the Moon Empress. After saying this, Mystic Moon looked at the Moon's shadow corridor in the inner palace. Gritting his teeth, Mystic Moon took the cell phone that he had not hung up and walked toward the Moon's shadow corridor. At that moment, the Moon Empress, who was in the Moon's shadow corridor's sleeping chamber, suddenly opened her eyes. The moment the Moon Empress opened her eyes, her aura changed drastically compared to before. Previously, the Moon Empress gave off the feeling of a bright moon in the sky that was illuminating the river. She had an unparalleled elegance as though she was born to be at the peak. Now, the Moon Empress' sharpness and nobility were all withdrawn the moment she opened her eyes. The bright moon in the sky that was illuminating the river quietly turned into a wisp of gentle moonlight. The corner of the Moon Empress' mouth revealed a smile. But immediately after, the Moon Empress' brows locked tightly. At that moment, the Moon Empress suddenly could not feel the existence of the extreme token that she had given Lin Yuan. At that moment, the Moon Empress heard Mystic Moon's voice coming from the door. Moon Empress, I have an important report that concerns His Highness. I have to disturb you. After hearing Mystic Moon's words, the Moon Empress immediately carried the rabbit that was nibbling on the carrot. In a flash, she left the sleeping chamber. When the Moon Empress appeared in front of Mystic Moon. When Mystic Moon sensed the Moon Empress state, he immediately knew that the Moon Empress had actually broken through that boundary. The Moon Empress was now in existence above an S+ spirit chi professional. However, Mystic Moon did not say a word of congratulations at that moment. Instead, he handed the cell phone that he had not hung up to the Moon Empress. When the Moon Empress picked up the phone, her originally cold face immediately turned expressionless and calm. Immediately after, countless experts in the Radiance Federation, including ordinary people, looked up at the sky. This was because the current situation had suddenly changed. It was originally afternoon, and the sun had just started to incline to the west. In just the blink of an eye, the sky had turned from white to dark. The scorching sun also turned into a bright crescent moon. However, the moonlight that was scattered by this bright moon was abnormally cold. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 491. The Moon Empress listened to the voice coming from the other end of the phone. Lin Yuan was sucked into a Class 3-dimensional rift outside Indigo Azure City. Furthermore, this Class 3-dimensional rift seemed to have encountered some problems that caused it to evolve. The Moon Empress' expressionless face suddenly blossomed into a smile. This smile was like an epiphyllum, with an instant of brilliance. Just as the Moon Empress revealed a smile, the bright moon that had replaced the blazing sun and sprinkled down cold moonlight was suddenly dyed with a layer of blood red. The bright moon was dyed with blood, and the originally cold and clear moonlight suddenly turned into a boiling murderous intent. At that moment, the pupils of all the experts in the Radiance Federation who were looking at the horizon contracted at the same time. Many ordinary people who were looking at the sky seemed to have unlocked their sealed memories. He suddenly thought of a day 10 years ago when a blood-stained moon hung high in the night sky. When Mystic Moon saw the Moon Empress expression, he was alarmed. How intense must the Moon Empress' murderous intent and worry for His Highness be for the Moon Empress to laugh out of extreme anger? However, the anger and worry in Xian Yu's heart weren't any lesser than the Moon Empress. Although Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress' disciple, he wasn't related to her by blood. However, this master-disciple relationship allowed Lin Yuan to be considered the Moon Empress' only descendant. The Moon Empress naturally viewed it as a treasure. Even the Moon Empress, who had always been domineering, had to carefully consider His Highness' feelings when doing things. Xian Yu might not be as meticulous with Lin Yuan as the Moon Empress. However, when he addressed Lin Yuan as Uncle Mystic, Mystic Moon also treated Lin Yuan as her only junior. However, the more Xian Yu cared about Lin, the more worried she was. When the dimensional rift evolved, even if the Moon Empress had already reached that level, she wouldn't be able to do so. However, it could only destroy the evolving dimensional rift. It still could not change the truth of this world's spatial laws. When the dimensional rift evolved, tear open the dimensional rift and rescue Her Highness. If one was sucked into an evolving dimensional rift, the only way to survive would be to safely spend some time inside. When the dimensional rift completed its evolution and opened again, the people inside would have the opportunity to come out again. Xian Yu immediately asked, and the Moon Empress hung up the phone. Moon Empress, the Class 3 water dimensional rift that was originally controlled will return to its original pinnacle Class 3 strength during the evolution process. Your Highness. Before Mystic Moon finished speaking, the Moon Empress' cold voice echoed. Follow me to the dimensional rift's entrance and wait for my disciple's return. How could the Moon Empress not know that during the evolution process, the controlled dimensional rift would return to its previous intensity? However, the Moon Empress wasn't worried about such dangers. The Moon Empress had been paying attention to Black's identity and had walked over step by step. Lin Yuan had a lot of secrets, and so did his abilities. Even without the extreme token that she had given him, the Moon Empress believed that he could find a chance to survive in the pinnacle Class 3 water world dimensional rift. However, at the juncture of the active period of the dimensional rift, Lin Yuan had accidentally discovered such a huge secret hidden in the coastal sea of Indigo Azure City. The true danger that Lin Yuan had to face did not come from the dimensional lifeforms inside the dimensional rift, but the enemies that were plotting everything in the dark. The worry on the Moon Empress' face grew stronger. If she had plotted everything in secret, would she have allowed the pinnacle Class 3 water world dimensional rift to only evolve by one grade? For the first time, the Moon Empress felt a sense of powerlessness. This sense of powerlessness made her clench her fists. The Moon Empress' sense of powerlessness didn't come from her strength. Even if she could sublimate the mountains, rivers, and seas into gaseous, liquid, and solid states, she could still raise the phase grade and quality like a rocket. He could also increase the phase grade and quality like a rocket, but he still couldn't change the spatial law and rescue his disciple. It was just like how a dead person couldn't be resurrected. Therefore, the only thing the Moon Empress could do now was to act as a master and wait for her disciple to walk out of the evolving dimensional rift alive with a heart full of hope. She could only wait and wait. Immediately after, the Moon Empress' beautiful eyes turned cold. Standing at the Moon's shadow corridor, Lin Fan looked out into the distance. The tree desires tranquility, but the wind doesn't stop. This wind is actually blowing on this Empress disciple. The rabbit in the Moon Empress' arms, who was constantly gnawing on the carrot, reluctantly stopped gnawing on the carrot and put it away. Its ears, which were usually drooping, also stood up at this moment and trembled slightly. Extreme purple intent rose in its eyes. In a dark room in the Spirit Guard's headquarters, a black-robed woman with a black veil on her face was reading the letters in her hands. After reading each letter, the woman would either put the letters on the left side and leave them idle, or she would roll up the corners of the letters and leave them on the right side. At that moment, the black-robed woman with a black veil on her face suddenly became solemn. She put down the letters she was reading and appeared in front of the Chief Guard pavilion in a flash. When the two elders in front of the pavilion saw the black-robed woman suddenly appear, they hurriedly bowed. "Chief Guard, may you rest in peace." After saying that, one of the elders bowed again and said, "Chief Guard Yi, look at the Moon Empress." The other elder also hurriedly said, "Chief Guard Yi, why don't you go and persuade?" The black-robed woman with a black veil on her face ignored the two elders and looked at the sky. 10,000 miles of clouds, thousands of mountains. At the end, the moon is stained with blood. Here, Bureau Chief Yi of the Spirit Guards plucked the brightest flower from a peony in front of the Bureau Chief Guard's pavilion. She threw the peony flower into the sky. The brightest peony flower became abnormally beautiful under the blood-colored moonlight, as if it was soaked in blood. Chief Guard Yi looked deeply at the blood-stained moon in the sky. She discovered that the blood-stained moon had unknowingly turned into two. Chief Guard Ye's face was covered with a black veil, so her expression could not be seen. However, a sigh came from behind the veil. The moonlight blooms with blood, the first and last quarter splits the moon. I can't persuade her. After a while, Chief Guard Yi looked at the two elders beside her and said, "Left and right attendants, you don't have to worry about this matter. Left and right attendants, you don't have to worry about this matter. After making arrangements for all the guard envoys, the two of you will go to the south and north respectively. One will go to Hearthstone City, and the other to Cold Frost City." When the two elders heard Chief Guard Ye's words, they immediately bowed and left. 166 Reading Network. Chapter 492. On the other side, the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer stood at the entrance of the evolving dimensional rift. After hanging up the phone, the Mother of Bloodbath looked at the bright blood-colored moon in the sky and pursed its lips tightly. The thought of becoming stronger in the Mother of Bloodbath's mind had never been as strong as it was at this moment. Only by being strong enough could it better protect. At the same time, this matter made the Mother of Bloodbath understand that as a path protector, it must always maintain a vigilant attitude. Listen stood beside the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer and looked at the evolving dimensional rift entrance with obvious worry on his face. When Listen had used the willpower rune to swear to become Lin Yuan's servant, he had also used his life as a bargaining chip for his allegiance and counted it as part of the oath. Under such circumstances, if Listen died, it would not affect Lin Yuan at all. At most, it would be equivalent to Lin Yuan losing a servant. However, if Lin Yuan died, it would be completely different. Listen would also die. However, the obvious worry on Listen's face was not only for himself. Instead, he sincerely hoped that Lin Yuan, who had saved him and given him a new life, could overcome the difficulties and survive. The water world dimensional rift, which was in the midst of evolving, suddenly opened up a hole. This hole spat out three figures, a giant two-headed lizard, and a strange plant. When he was spat out of the spatial rift, Lin Yuan immediately looked at the surrounding environment. After seeing the surrounding environment, Lin Yuan subconsciously let the amber button-shaped source sand at his cuff turn into a wisp of fine sand and drill into the rock formation under his feet. But then, Lin Yuan's brows furrowed tightly. At that time, when he pulled out the last floating silver thread, the dimensional rift entrance suddenly appeared. Although Lin Yuan did not have time to do anything, his mind was very sharp. He knew that the 500 spatial magnetic ores and so many floating silver threads were to hide this dimensional rift that had suddenly appeared. Putting aside who had secretly set up this dimensional rift entrance, just the fact that it had opened in the sea showed that this dimensional rift was a water world dimensional rift. This showed that this dimensional rift that had suddenly appeared was a water world dimensional rift. However, the surrounding environment made Lin Yuan feel a little strange. The interior of the water world dimensional rift was very humid, and the air was filled with salty water vapor. However, it was not a world completely submerged in water. As far as the eye could see, there was not a single water world dimensional creature in sight. Water world dimensional creatures were soft-bodied creatures with tentacles. Without the existence of seawater, even moving would be a problem. In this waterless environment, high-level water world dimensional creatures might be able to rely on the large amount of water vapor in the air to create a small body of water to survive. However, to low-level water world dimensional creatures, an environment without water was undoubtedly a dead end. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of the spatial fluctuations he and the Mother of Bloodbath had seen in the sea and the large amount of water world dimensional lifeforms' flesh pouring out. There was the flesh of a platinum water world dimensional creature in it. Platinum water world dimensional creatures naturally wouldn't die out of thin air, nor would they chop themselves into pieces after death. Coupled with the fact that the environment in this dimensional rift was completely different from a normal water world, it meant that there was definitely a huge problem. As Lin Yuan let the source sand turn into sand particles and drill into the dry seabed under his feet, a large amount of sand was created. Lu Jia immediately let the insect queen transform into an insect base on the spot and produce a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects. Lu Jia looked at the surrounding environment and the dimensional rift entrance that had been sealed behind him. He turned to look at Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, based on the intensity of the dimensional fluctuations at the dimensional rift entrance, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift." After saying that, Lu Jia looked at the layer of violent dimensional energy in the dimensional rift and said in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, based on the intensity of the dimensional fluctuations at the dimensional rift entrance, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift." After saying that, Lu Jia looked at the layer of violent dimensional energy in the dimensional rift and continued to say in a deep voice, "Lin Yuan, this dimensional rift is at least a class 3 dimensional rift. It's at least a class 3 dimensional rift, and it's still evolving." Lu Jia's 2 sentences directly revealed the seriousness of this matter. Lin Yuan knew that if the class 3 water world dimensional rift evolved, it would become a class 4 water world dimensional rift. Now that the dimensional rift was active, there were a lot of variables in it all of a sudden. A class 4 dimensional rift already had class 6 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to suzerain phase. If the dimensional rift evolved to class 5 due to a freak combination of factors during the active period of the dimensional rift, then there might be class 7 dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to myth breed phase. During the active period of the dimensional rift, the number of dimensional lifeforms that gushed out was far higher than usual. If there were really a large number of water world dimensional lifeforms that were equivalent to myth breed phase, Indigo Azure City, which was very close to here, would instantly turn into a destroyed ruin under the sea. Lin Yuan knew that there was only one possibility for the dimensional rift to evolve. That was, there was an additional number of source-type items at the hub of this water world dimensional rift that connected to the water world. Lin Yuan had also encountered such a situation when he had been training in the Abyss dimensional rift. However, he had not directly participated at that time. Instead, the Mother of Bloodbath had taken action to solve the problem perfectly. But now, facing such a matter, only Lin Yuan, Lu Jia, and Zhou Luo could complete it. During the process of the dimensional rift's evolution, Lin Yuan actually only needed to hide at his current location, which was the entrance of the dimensional rift. Once the dimensional rift completed its evolution, escaping was the safest option. In order to not let the enemies in the rift discover them, he could even let the source sand precipitate a large number of ferromanganese chain swords. The chain swords made of ferromanganese formed a spacious and enclosed space. He, Lu Jia, and Zhou Luo hid inside. Then, the source sand would sink the sealed ferromanganese space into the ground to hide it as much as possible. However, Lin Yuan would not do that. It was just like how Lin Yuan had chosen to defend Millstone Town to the death. In the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, it would choose to resist the Demon Sea together with everyone else. This time, he also wanted to try to stop the Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift beneath his feet from evolving. He still had the trump card that his master had given him. Even if he encountered a powerful enemy, he would still be able to put up a fight. Lin Yuan shifted his gaze to Lu Jia and Zhou Luo. "Brother Lu, Zhou Luo, I want to go to the hub to stop the evolution of this dimensional rift." Lin Yuan's voice wasn't loud. But in the humid air, a radiant flame seemed to have been ignited. Second update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. After the body recovers, I will resume the third update. Occasionally, there will be explosive updates. Mwah. End of this chapter. Chapter 493. In the humid air, the dazzling flame was only a tiny dot at first. However, after Lin Yuan said that, the hesitant expression on Lu Jia's face disappeared. His eyes also ignited with the radiant flame. As a member of the Radiance 100 sequence, Lu Jia would naturally choose to prevent this possible disaster outside Indigo Azure City. At the same time, Lu Jia was also Lin Yuan's retainer knight. Lu Jia had long regarded Lin Yuan as his faith. It could be said that every decision Lin Yuan made was upholding Lu Jia's glory. However, the glory and faith suddenly made the radiant glow in Lu Jia's eyes brighter. After hearing Lin Yuan's thoughts, Zhou Luo was already prepared to face the upcoming battle in his heart. However, when he saw the determined look in Lin Yuan's eyes, Zhou Luo suddenly felt his heart warm up. That indistinct radiant flame seemed to have a small light spot that landed in a corner of Zhou Luo's heart. The more Lin Yuan looked at the surrounding environment, the more he felt that it was more difficult to stop this Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift's evolution. The biggest problem for him now was how to find the dimensional hub that connected the Water World Dimensional Rift to the Water World. Lin Yuan's ethereal jellyfish had not been sucked into the dimensional rift. Lu Jia and Zhou Luo did not have any spatial source-type lifeforms that were good at sensing spatial fluctuations. Therefore, they could only use the stupid method of carpet searching. The most suitable for carpet searching now were the flying insects that Lu Jia's insect queen had created. Lin Yuan said to Lu Jia, "Big brother Lu, you'll be in charge of the exploration. Big brother Lu, you will be responsible for the investigation. Try to find the location of the dimensional rift's hub." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jia released the spiritual power in his body into the insect queen's body, which had transformed into the insect queen's base. As Lu Jia channeled a large amount of spirit qi, the insect queen's sac immediately swelled up. A large amount of green liquid energy quickly surged in the sac, and the high-frequency vibrations turned the green liquid energy into sticky insect protein. The insect protein was continuously produced and finally returned to the insect queen's body through the sac. Amidst the intense vibrations, the insect queen's 3-meter-tall insect queen suddenly expanded. The entrance to the insectoid base spat out nearly 200 meters of hurricane owlet moths like a flood. The 200 black winged owlet moths that the insect queen had spat out were different from the black winged owlet moths that he had seen before. These 200 hurricane owlet moths didn't have such powerful wind elemental energy ripples. The hurricane owlet moths were probably used by Lu Jia to conserve his own spiritual energy and the insect queen's energy. He had only replicated a portion of the hurricane owlet moth's genetic model and produced an incomplete existence. Lu Jia commanded the insect queen to produce these incomplete hurricane owlet moths, and they immediately flapped their wings and rose into the air. In this Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift that was in the process of evolving, it flew out in a net-like pattern. With Lu Jia's current location as the center point, the scattered hurricane owlet moths could act as Lu Jia's eyes in this dimensional rift. No matter what, the most important thing to do in this unfamiliar place was to gather information. Investigate and grasp the surrounding environment and possible enemies. Since Lin Yuan had decided to stop the dimensional rift's evolution, he would inevitably clash with the hidden enemies in the dimensional rift. Therefore, the first step to understand the enemy's movements and situation, so that they would not become deaf and mute, was the next most important task. Lu Jia said as he looked at Lin Yuan. Given the size of the Class 3 dimensional rift, these hurricane owlet moths will need at least 6 hours to roughly explore it. Upon hearing Lu Jia's words, Lin Yuan frowned even harder. Based on the current time, there was only less than a day before the active period of the dimensional rift. The dimensional rift would only need 12 hours to complete its evolution. If Lin Yuan wanted to stop the dimensional rift's evolution, he would need to do it within 12 hours. The fact that they had been sucked into the dimensional rift meant that the dimensional rift was still open and had yet to evolve. Instead, the dimensional rift had only begun to evolve after they had been sucked in. Lu Jia's hurricane owlet moths needed 6 hours to complete their search, which cut the original 12 hours in half. However, being anxious wouldn't solve any problems. Lin Yuan naturally understood this principle. He summoned the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur, Blackie, which he had rarely summoned before. The last time he had summoned Blackie, it had just been a spirit-gather goldfish. After summoning Blackie, Lin Yuan let it face Lu Jia and himself. He released 2 consecutive spirit injections. After Blackie had evolved into a spirit-gather ichthyosaur, its ability, spirit injection, had also undergone significant changes. Previously, spirit injection had directly helped the target recover a certain amount of spiritual power. Now, after becoming a spirit gather ichthyosaur, Blackie could use spirit injection again to inject a certain amount of spiritual power into the target's body. It would also attract the spirit chi in the air into the target's body for a certain period of time and convert it into spiritual power. Lin Yuan didn't think much of this change at first. After all, the amount of spirit chi in the air was simply too little in the outside world. Therefore, the new effect of this skill seemed to be negligible. However, in the evolving Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift, the concentration of spirit chi in the air was far higher than that of the outside world. This also greatly increased the spirit injection's effect. It could even be said that the spirit gather ichthyosaur's spirit injection here directly recovering spiritual power was not as much as the effect of being guided to absorb the spirit chi in the air and convert it into spiritual power. Lu Jie didn't expect Lin Yuan to actually nurture such a support fei that could increase the body's spiritual power. For Lu Jie, the most frightening thing about commanding the insect queen in battle was the lack of spiritual power in his body. Therefore, Lu Jie had always been strictly calculating the use of spiritual power in his body. Now that the spirit gather ichthyosaur could directly restore the body's spiritual power, Lu Jie no longer had to worry about the consumption of spiritual power in his body. At once, Lu Jie consumed the spiritual power in his body and ordered the insect queen to produce 200 incomplete hurricane owlet moths. The multiplied number of hurricane owlet moths could better find the hub location of source-type items in the evolving dimensional rift during the exploration process. It was originally estimated to take 6 hours, but in less than 3 hours, Lu Jie's tightly closed eyes opened. After opening his eyes, Lu Jie's expression was exceptionally solemn. I'm asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 494. Lu Jie used the insect queen's consciousness to attach to the produced hurricane owlet moths and investigate for 3 hours. Lin Yuan had been madly overdrawing the spiritual power in his body. Activating the source sand, it shattered a large number of rocks under the seabed and produced fine sand particles. Lin Yuan stomped his feet and could not help but sigh. The hardness of the rocks under this water world dimensional rift seabed was really not just for show. It was many times harder than the purplish-black soil in the Abyss Dimensional Rift. Back then, in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, in order to ensure the strength of the produced gravel, Li Yuanfeng had to use the Level 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Lin Yuan had purposely made the source sand dig 100 meters underground. To dig through the muddy rocks 100 meters underground. However, the source sand's grinding efficiency was already very low for the rocks 10 meters below the seabed. It could be said that it was extremely difficult for the source sand to create sand in such an environment. Even if the ferromanganese was plated on the surface of the gravel and polished, it was still far from Lin Yuan's expectations. In the end, after making some choices, Lin Yuan decided to only let the source sand create sand in the rock stratum that was 1 to 2 meters deep. The deeper the seabed, the harder the rock was. The source sand's sand production speed could barely keep up with Lin Yuan's needs by creating sand in the rock stratum that was 1 to 2 meters deep. However, it had to be said that the quality of the gravel produced by the source sand this time was amazing. It was far superior to the quality of the gravel that Lin Yuan had produced in the previous battle. However, the rate of spiritual power consumption in his body was now 3 times faster than usual. Even if the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur was constantly using spirit injection on Lin Yuan, it would not stop. Lin Yuan still felt that the spiritual power reserves in his body were about to be emptied. After all, Lin Yuan was only a C-rank spirit chi professional. Upon seeing Lu Jie open his eyes, Lin Yuan hurriedly asked, "Brother Lu, what did the hurricane owlet moth find out?" When Lu Jie opened his eyes, his expression was unusually ugly. It was obvious that he had discovered some bad news. Lu Jie said sternly, "I should have found the location of the dimensional hub. I've also discovered many living figures in this area. Upon hearing Lu Jie's words, Lin Yuan replied with a smile despite his unusually grim expression. That's a good thing. After all, we're halfway ahead of the predicted 6 hours. Lin Yuan paused for a moment before continuing. Brother Lu, help me spawn 2 more hurricane owlet moths and slowly fly toward the dimensional hub. Lu Jie froze when he heard Lin Yuan's request, but he immediately let the insect queen create 2 more hurricane owlet moths. At that moment, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate to activate the spirit chi imprint that he had been accumulating previously. The moment Lin Yuan undid the spirit chi imprint, Blackie's exclusive skill, spirit chi imprint, immediately lit up. Immediately afterward, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo were shocked to find that there seemed to be a tsunami-like spiritual power bursting out of Lin Yuan's body. Lin Yuan channeled the spirit chi from the spirit chi imprint into the source sand beneath his feet. The source sand, which had already spread a few kilometers away in the past 3 hours, quickly moved in the direction the hurricane owlet moth had pointed. It shattered the rocks on the seabed and extended toward the hub of the dimensional rift. With the infusion of Lin Yuan's massive amount of spirit chi, the source sand was producing gravel at a speed that was several times faster than before. It could completely keep up with the slow flying speed of the hurricane owlet moths. After Lu Jie spawned 2 new hurricane owlet moths, he shouted at the insect queen. Use blast recovery. Immediately after, the insect queen's body lit up with many green lusters, and a large amount of green liquid suddenly flowed back from its sac. While Lu Jie commanded the insect queen to produce flesh-mincing blade insects, he continued to tell Lin Yuan about the situation he had just observed. The enemy has about 60 to 70 spirit chi professionals with platinum phase and no less than 20 with diamond phase. My hurricane owlet moths were created with only a portion of the genetic panel, so their combat ability isn't complete. Therefore, the hurricane owlet moths in this range didn't break through the encirclement of these spirit chi professionals with diamond phase and reach the central area. Therefore, I'm not sure if there are more powerful forces in the central area. After Lu Jie finished speaking, he added another sentence. I can't confirm the spirit chi professionals observed by the hurricane owlet moths, but most of their contracted phase are species that don't exist in the Radiance Federation. When Lu Jie said this, the expression on his masked face could not be seen clearly. However, his eyes revealed obvious killing intent. Lin Yuan was not surprised by Lu Jie's situation. As early as when he had discovered so many spatial magnetic ores, Lin Yuan had vaguely guessed it. It was just that Lin Yuan's investigation had confirmed his previous guess. Upon hearing Lu Jie's description of the opponent's strength, Lin Yuan immediately felt an unprecedented pressure. Lin Yuan's contracted source sand had reached Gold I/Fantasy I and was about to advance to Fantasy II. In terms of strength, it was only the standard of a Platinum Fae. Lu Jie had the Platinum/Fantasy breed insect queen, but its strength was only the standard of a Diamond Fae. As a King-class expert, Zhou Luo had the Diamond I/Fantasy I Lava Dragon Lizard, which could be said to be stronger than Lin Yuan and Lu Jie. However, the Lava Dragon Lizard was just a defense-type Fae. It was good at defense, not offense. Therefore, the disparity in combat power between the enemy and him was too great. In fact, it was even possible that the other party possessed even greater combat prowess that they had yet to discover. Lin Yuan touched the extreme token hanging on his neck. It seemed that he had to use it if he wanted to win. Lin Yuan took off the extreme token hanging on his neck and said to Lu Jie and Zhou Luo, "This contains an expert's range attack. There's an area of effect attack from a powerhouse in here. In terms of strength, the strength of this range attack should be able to break the few red crystal spiders that the mother of Bloodbath threw to us on the deserted island." Lin Yuan did not fully know the Moon Empress' strength. He only knew that his master, the Moon Empress, was a revered Class 5 creation master and was very powerful. However, since she could help the mother of Bloodbath get through the world cleansing. In terms of strength, she must be stronger than the mother of Bloodbath. Lin Yuan showed his trump card to Lu Jie and Zhou Luo. On the one hand, he wanted to tell Lu Jie and Zhou Luo his plan. On the other hand, it was to restore Lu Jie and Zhou Luo's confidence in such a situation. Second, please recommend votes and monthly votes. The stitches are about to be removed. It's finally going to get better. End of this chapter. Chapter 495. A golden chariot streaked across the clear skies of the ocean. It left golden ripples in the air above the ocean, making the entire sky look more like a golden ocean than the vast ocean below. The golden ocean in the sky was bathed in the glory of victory. It was as if the entire sky had transformed into a golden ocean, singing the praises of victory after victory. In front of the chariot, there were 2 warhorses carved from metal, shining with a golden luster, raising their manes. The golden chariot carried with it the might of a monarch ruling over the world. On the chariot, there was a woman with golden eyes and a head of golden hair that hung down to her shoulders. Her face was expressionless. However, it gave the world a solemn and dignified air. Suddenly, several dragon breaths shot into the sky, sweeping toward the golden chariot from the ocean. The ocean was clearly blue, but the dragon breaths that swept across the sky were pitch black like ink. Several pitch-black dragon breaths seemed to form a gloomy world, trying to shatter the glorious golden ocean in the sky. At this moment, the manes of the 2 warhorses on the golden chariot flashed with a faint layer of golden light. This faint layer of golden light seemed to form a realm of its own. It kept the pitch-black dragon breaths at bay, not allowing them to advance even an inch. When the pitch-black dragon breaths sensed that they were unable to break through this layer of golden light, they immediately turned into chains. In an instant, the golden chariot and the expressionless woman within the chariot were imprisoned. A playful smile appeared on the face of the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman. There was an indescribable hint of mockery in this playful smile. And there was a hint of pity in her golden eyes, as if she was giving alms. I presume that you have been waiting for me here for a long time. As soon as the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman's voice fell, several ink-colored satin floated up from the ocean, covering the sky and covering the earth. Each piece of ink-colored satin flickered with a gloomy luster, making them look extremely smooth. In an instant, they completely covered the azure ocean. A skinny old man stood on one of the ink-colored satin, and beside him was an extremely young woman with short hair. The old man stood one step behind the short-haired woman, and his expression was one of respect and love for the short-haired woman. The short-haired woman stared at the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman in the sky. His originally black pupils were filled with blood and turned dark red. Just from the look in her eyes, one could tell that this short-haired woman had a shocking hatred for the golden-haired, golden-eyed woman in the chariot in the sky. The old man raised his head and looked at the golden-haired, golden-eyed lady in the sky and said coldly, "Seventh page war, you have to pay for what you did in the Dark Continent." The woman's tone of mockery and pity became even more pronounced upon hearing this. "You want me to pay the price? Just because of the nether sea jellyfish beneath your feet?" As soon as Seventh Page War finished speaking, the sea began to surge violently. A huge black jellyfish with purple flowing lights emerged from the bottom of the sea. When the canopy at the top opened and closed, it seemed as if it could swallow the entire sea. Then, a huge repulsive force came from the nether seawater jellyfish, which was completely black and had purple light flowing around its body. Then, the nether sea jellyfish compressed all the seawater into a black water droplet. This black water droplet, which carried the weight of the sea, went straight toward the golden chariot in the sky. Seventh Page War, who was sitting on the golden chariot, looked at the black water droplet spat out by the nether sea jellyfish and nether sea jellyfish in the sea below the chariot and raised his hand in disdain. The golden chariot suddenly shone brightly, as if it had become a sun. In an instant, the dark world created by the nether sea jellyfish was dispelled by the brilliant light. The 2 war horses that were pulling the carriage neighed twice, instantly shattering the black water droplets that were attacking them. A curtain of rain soaked with golden luster fell from the sky. The curtain of rain soaked with golden luster fell on the black silk-like tentacles of the nether sea jellyfish. Tiny holes were directly burned into the surface one after another. It was not too late to burn the small holes. These burnt holes were expanding rapidly, corroding the black satin-like tentacles of the nether sea jellyfish until they were unrecognizable. The old man immediately mobilized the spiritual power in his body to command the nether sea jellyfish to continue supporting a dark world to resist. At that moment, 7th Page War frowned. A look of surprise and conflict appeared on his originally expressionless face. Then, as if he had received some bad news, his face turned completely cold. The expression on 7th Page War's face was terrifyingly cold, but it was as if there was something urgent that he did not need to do. He was not in a hurry to take action. At that moment, the eyes of the short-haired woman beside the old man, which had turned dark red because of hatred, instantly turned pink. A bewitching pink flower appeared in the short-haired woman's hand. The moment this pink flower appeared in the short-haired woman's hand, her aura changed. Her original unswerving determination had turned into an indescribably charming one. She was like a goddess of beauty who suddenly appeared in the dark sea and the flickering glow in the sky. It could inspire anyone to fall in love with her. The short-haired woman rose into the air and appeared next to 7th Page War in a flash. She held the bewitching pink flower in her hand and asked 7th Page War softly. Chapter 496. A look of disbelief appeared on the short-haired woman's face. All that was left of the beautiful flower in his hand was a short stem and a root. Impossible. The mocking expression in 7th Page War's eyes was vividly revealed at this moment. Sacred source life form, absolute love poppy. This is the first time I've seen a sacred source life form that can manipulate the soul of the same kind. It's really good stuff. Just as 7th Page War was speaking, the golden chariot under 7th Page War's feet disappeared. 7th Page War stood in the air and looked at everything under his feet with a disdainful expression. The Dark Envoy jointly chosen by the 7 Dark States is actually an expert who plays with emotions at the soul level. How interesting. The Dark Continent has now become a cornerstone under the Pagoda Canon. I don't have time to deal with you, but you took the initiative to send yourself to me. Because you obstructed me and delayed my important matters, you deserve death. Since you wasted one of my sacred source life forms, I'll use all of you to make wax figures and slowly repay you under the baptism spring. 7th Page War frowned slightly. He did not expect the Radiance Federation's arrangements to be discovered. But no matter who you are, this sacred source life form is not that easy to obtain. The Radiance Federation must eat the big gift that I've prepared with added chips. However, 7th Page War vented his anger on the old man and the woman in front of him. The short-haired woman still had a look of disbelief on her face. You've been charmed by the sacred source life form, absolute love poppy. Even if you're stronger than me, I can feel it in advance when you break free from my charm. 7th Page War's anger surged, and he had lost interest in talking to this short-haired woman. When have I ever been charmed? I'm not the same kind as you. As soon as 7th Page War's voice fell, golden light flowed all over 7th Page War's body, and he turned into a golden datura flower. The short-haired woman cried out in horror. You're actually not a human. You're a plant fae. Just as 7th Page War returned to its original body, the old man on the tentacle of the nether sea jellyfish made a prompt decision to summon a small silver tuna-like fish. Then, the nether sea jellyfish beneath the old man's feet started burning like a withered tree. Sensing the old man's movements, 2 golden petals shot out from the petals of the golden mandara flower that the 7th Page War had transformed into. The light and shadow of the 2 petals seemed to contain the grandeur of 2 battles. The old man completely disregarded the safety of the nether sea jellyfish. The nether sea jellyfish, which was enormous in size and had more than half of its tentacles still in the sea, wrapped itself with its black, silk-like tentacles. Then, it used its huge body to greet the 2 golden flower petals. At this time, the silver tuna-like fish had already torn the space apart. The old man immediately pulled the short-haired woman and fled into the tear in space. In just an instant, the nether sea jellyfish that came into contact with the two golden petals turned into rags and scattered on the surface of the sea. Soon after, it sank towards the deep sea, bringing life to the deep sea that far exceeded that of a large-scale whale fall. One of the golden silhouettes didn't slow down after destroying the nether sea jellyfish. However, it still allowed the short-haired woman and the old man to escape into the tear in space created by the silver fish. However, half of the old man's body was hit by the golden petal light, and that half of his body immediately became the same as the nether sea jellyfish. Seventh Page War stood in the sky above the turbulent sea, watching the various ferocious sea beasts nibbling at the feast left behind after the nether sea jellyfish exploded. It was just that the energy contained in the flesh of the nether sea jellyfish was too high. Many greedy sea beasts that didn't meet the requirements were blown to pieces by this energy. This also brought a feast for other weaker sea beasts. In just an instant, the sea was dyed red by the blood of countless sea beasts. At this moment, Seventh Page War suddenly raised its head, changing its previous disdainful attitude. Instead, it looked at the sky with a solemn expression. The sky suddenly darkened, and a long, silent night descended. A bright moon rose high in the silent night sky. In just a moment, the bright moon was dyed with a layer of blood. The bright moon that suddenly appeared in the sky instantly divided into a crescent moon, and the crescent moon was dyed with a blood-colored luster. Seventh Page War felt the endless murderous intent in the blood-colored crescent moon. Seventh Page War frowned even more. At that moment, the words that came out of Seventh Page War's mouth no longer contained the pity and mockery from before. There was only solemnity. The moonlight blooms with blood, and the crescent moon splits. It seems that there's no need for me to go to the Radiance Federation anymore. Just as Seventh Page War was about to summon the Radiance Chariot to return, it suddenly repeated the expression that the short-haired woman had when she used the sacred source life form, the absolute love poppy. Then, Seventh Page War returned to its previous appearance and said softly, "It actually has such a strong charm on the souls of non-similar creatures. It actually has such a strong charm effect on the souls of creatures that aren't of the same species. The absolute love poppy is really not bad. But in the end, there won't be a chance for it to bloom again." While speaking, Seventh Page War shook the flower mud left behind after the absolute love poppy was crushed in his hand in disgust. The Radiance Chariot went far away, leaving a sentence on the sea. Pink and flirtatious flowers are really vulgar. The kind of plant that can eat meat, look at me with deep feelings, and bloom a sea of flowers for me in the blink of an eye will make me fall in love. This sentence lingered for a moment before it was blown away by the rapid sea breeze. Big Brother Lu, try to let the produced flesh-mincing blade insects drill into the seabed under your feet. Lin Yuan's words made Lu Jia a little confused. Lu Jia was still producing the lightning-gathering moths and plasma caterpillars without stopping. To the enemy, the lightning beam that the lightning-gathering moths could release after being charged with plasma by the plasma caterpillars. This was the strongest attack that they could use at present. Whenever the produced plasma caterpillars could not spit out more plasma, Lu Jia would let the insect queen use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery. Lu Jia got the insect queen to use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery. It treated the plasma caterpillars that had lost their value as scrap and self-destructed to recover their energy. This would maximize the maximum value of every trace of energy in the insect queen's body. After listening to Lin Yuan's instructions, Lu Jia was ready to let the flesh-mincing blade insects try to use their blade-like insect limbs to dig the seabed. However, in Lu Jia's opinion, even if the flesh-mincing blade insects could drill into the seabed with the hardness of the seabed under their feet, they would only be able to hide and would completely lose their mobility. At that moment, Lu Jia suddenly realized that a huge quicksand vortex had suddenly appeared on the seabed under Lin Yuan's feet. Lu Jia's eyes lit up, and he immediately understood what Lin Yuan meant. Zhou Luo looked at the quicksand vortex that suddenly appeared under Lin Yuan's feet and the insect sea behind Lu Jia and swallowed hard. The younger generation these days was too fucking strong. Second update, seeking recommendation votes, seeking monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 497. In Zhou Luo's opinion, as a member of the Radiance 100 sequence number 30, it was understandable that Lu Jia had such strength. After all, the top members of the Radiance 100 sequence had combat power that was comparable to a king-class expert. Zhou Luo compared his strength before he met Lin Yuan. With the strength of a Platinum 9/Fantasy Iron Bone splitting lizard facing the massive swarm of insects created by Lu Jia's insect queen, he couldn't help but think to himself. How long could he hold on? As a king-class expert, Zhou Luo naturally had the strength of an A-rank spirit chi professional. The amount of spiritual energy in his body was much higher than Lu Jia's. However, Lu Jia's insect queen's exclusive skill could detonate the produced insects. On one hand, these exploding insects could be used as energy for the insect queen to recover. On the other hand, the exploding bugs themselves dealt quite a bit of damage. At this rate, it was hard to say if his lava dragon lizard would be killed by the swarm created by Lu Jia's insect queen. The strength displayed by Lu Jia made Zhou Luo understand the strength of the younger generation. The strength that Lin Yuan displayed completely shocked Zhou Luo. Zhou Luo had seen what Lin Yuan looked like without his mask. At that time, Zhou Luo had been very surprised that Lin Yuan had so many resources but was actually so young. Zhou Luo had found out about Black's identity later on. However, when Zhou Luo saw the strength Lin Yuan displayed now, it was clearly much stronger than the ability Black had displayed on Star Web previously. This meant that Lin Yuan, who was Black, had previously maintained a winning streak in the Celestial Stairway duels in the Star Tower. However, he was still concealing his strength and didn't fully display it. Coupled with Lin Yuan's tsunami-like spiritual power, Zhou Luo was even more alarmed. Zhou Luo could sense that Lin Yuan was injecting a large amount of spiritual power into his feet, but he did not know that as Lin Yuan injected a large amount of spiritual power into the elemental source-type item under his feet, how many parts of the seabed had been shattered and turned into rolling yellow sand. Lu Jia was currently commanding a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects to drill into the huge quicksand vortex that suddenly appeared under Lin Yuan's feet. As a large number of flesh-mincing blade insects drilled into the quicksand vortex, Lu Jia's eyes became brighter and brighter. The insect queen attached its consciousness to the flesh-mincing blade insect. Lu Jia saw how big of a project Lin Yuan had created in the seabed under his feet in just a few hours. There were several tunnels on the seabed that led to the dimensional rift. The size of the tunnel was big enough for 5 flesh-mincing blade insects to pass through side by side. Even the shield ladybugs could travel freely in the tunnel on the seabed. The connection and arrangement of several tunnels allowed the flesh-mincing blade insects that entered the quicksand under the seabed to form an orderly swarm. All of Lu Jia's combat power, which had been in the open, had been transferred to the shadows. The quicksand in the seabed could also greatly enhance the mobility of the flesh-mincing blade insects. The flesh-mincing blade insects in the quicksand could be transported to any place in the underground tunnel, and the swarm could directly engage in battle. "Brother Lu, let's start the explosion." He took a deep breath and injected the majestic spiritual power in his body into Blackie's body. The spirit-drawing ichthyosaur Blackie kept injecting spiritual energy into Lu Jia to help him recover his depleted spiritual energy. Lu Jia suddenly realized that after the massive amount of spiritual power in Lin Yuan's body boiled up. Now, Lin Yuan urged the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur to perform the spirit-drawing ichthyosaur spirit injection without caring about the spiritual power consumption in his body. The spiritual power in his body was like a person with kidney deficiency who had eaten a kidney treasure. Fierce. 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 His spiritual power began to rise. Lu Jia immediately injected the rapidly recovering spiritual power in his body into the insect queen's body and commanded it to continue producing the flesh-mincing blade insects, shield ladybugs, plasma caterpillars, lightning-gathering moths, and hurricane owlet moths. He expanded the swarm of insects he controlled to the greatest extent. Lu Jia understood that he was currently the core output position in the combat team formed by him, Lin Yuan, and Zhou Luo. In order to maximize the team's damage, Lu Jia could be said to have spared no effort to produce the swarm of insects in the most optimal ratio. Lin Yuan had also clarified his position in this battle. It was also the responsibility that he had to play in the next battle. Lin Yuan was now considered an all-rounder. However, his defense was still relatively weak. After all, Lin Yuan's defense was mostly for personal protection. In the current team, the King-class defense-type Spirit Chi professional, Zhou Luo, was fully responsible for the defense. There was no need for Lin Yuan to intervene at all. In terms of output, since Chimei was asleep, Lin Yuan could only use Red Thorn, the Acid Corrosion Bees, and the Source Sand. Although Red Thorn's Sea of Flowers was extremely powerful against large-scale dimensional lifeforms, its Silver/Fantasy breed strength was still far inferior to the current combat level. In the end, Red Thorn's Silver/Fantasy breed strength was still far from the current combat level. Therefore, Lin Yuan defined himself as a healer and support position. The Jasmine Lily was fully responsible for the healing. The support was replenished by the spirit-drawing Ichthyosaur, Blackie, and the Source Sand had a controlling effect. It could also attach a thin layer of sand shield to the flesh-mincing blade insects and shield ladybugs to help resist and share some of the damage. The thin sand shield's effect was not obvious on a single insect. However, if it could be used to enhance the entire insect swarm, the effect would be immeasurable. Of course, all of this was determined by Lin Yuan not caring about the consumption of the accumulated Spirit Chi in the spirit-drawing Ichthyosaur's exclusive skill, Spirit Chi Imprint. For example, Lin Yuan treated himself as a high-capacity power bank. He transferred the spiritual power in his body to Lu Jia's body through the spirit injection method. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Lin Yuan supported the Source Sand to continue creating sand on the seabed while helping Lu Jia recover his spiritual power. In these 2 hours, Lin Yuan had squandered the spiritual power content in the Spirit Chi Imprint to only 1/3. Zhou Luo felt increasingly numb at the side. Zhou Luo had forgotten how many insects he had seen burrowing into the quicksand vortex on the seabed. Even the flying insect species phase, the lightning-gathering owlet moth and the hurricane owlet moth, wrapped their bodies with their wings and burrowed into the yellow sand under their feet. This was truly a terrifying pair of master and servant. In 2 hours, this pair of master and servant had increased their original combat power by many times. Lin Yuan felt the existence of the insects that Lu Jia had commanded the insect queen to produce in the Source Sand and felt a little more confident. In the process of controlling the quicksand to transport the insect swarm, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a unique charm of positional warfare. First update seeking recommendations, monthly votes. The biggest battle since the start of this book had finally begun. I've been writing and editing recently. Sob, sob, sob. Maybe I'll send it a little slower. I'll stabilize my body and recover my body. End of this chapter. Chapter 498. His Source Sand was a link to the Zerg's positional warfare. It allowed the originally rigid and cumbersome positional warfare to become flexible. In a very short period of time, he could instantly set up a formation. At the same time, it allowed the sea of insects in the open to become a method of surprise attacks. Lu Jia and Lin Yuan stopped at the same time and looked at each other with a smile. Lin Yuan turned to look at Zhou Luo and said, "We can go now." Lin Yuan and Lu Jia rode on the lava dragon lizard's back while Zhou Luo rode in front. The 10-meter-long lava dragon lizard sprinted toward the dimensional hub. Sitting on the lava dragon lizard's back, Lin Yuan realized that riding on a land fae was far more satisfying than riding on a flying fae. Flying in the sky, he could only see the passing clouds. However, when he was riding on a fae and sprinting on the ground, the scene of the surroundings whizzing past flashed in his eyes. There was an incomparable sense of satisfaction. This upgraded Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift might not be like ordinary Water World Dimensional Rifts with boundless seawater, but it wasn't the same as ordinary Water World Dimensional Rifts. However, the air was still emitting a salty smell that was unique to the Water World Dimensional Rift. Lin Yuan's eyes slowly narrowed, and he took a deep breath to firm himself up. Lin Yuan knew that what he was about to experience next was a battle where either he or he would perish. There will be blood, and there will even be deaths. Although Lin Yuan had taken out the extreme token that his master had given him and regained Lu Jie's and Zhou Luo's confidence, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo's confidence had been restored. However, the extreme token couldn't be used unless it was absolutely necessary. On one hand, no one knew if there were more powerful enemies hiding in the dark in places that Lu Jie's hurricane owlet moths failed to find. Another reason was that the dimensional rift was in the process of evolving. It would form a barrier made of origin turbulence outside the source-type items in the dimensional hub's inner layer. When a Class 3 dimensional rift evolved to Class 4, the dimensional barrier on its surface would reach the toughness of a diamond grade. With such strength, both Lu Jie and Zhou Luo would be able to destroy it. However, if this dimensional rift was upgraded to not just Class 4, but Class 5, it would be much more powerful. As such, the dimensional barrier on the surface could only be broken by the strength of a suzerain or above. In order to stop the dimensional rift's evolution, the most basic requirement was to break the dimensional barrier. Therefore, Lin Yuan's trump card could not be used until he reached the dimensional rift's hub. Lin Yuan might not have said it explicitly, but Lu Jie and Zhou Luo were very clear about it. Zhou Luo, who was driving the lava dragon lizard, suddenly fell silent for a moment. Then, he turned to look at Lin Yuan and Lu Jie. He noticed that Lin Yuan and Lu Jie's faces were full of determination. Zhou Luomin smirked, turned his head, and reached out to touch his old buddy, the lava dragon lizard. His eyes also became determined. At the same time, a carefree smile suddenly appeared on Zhou Luo's face. Her eyes flashed with a moving expression, as if she had made a decision in her heart. Lin Yuan, who was sitting on the lava dragon lizard's back, suddenly tensed up as he sensed the feedback from the source sand under the seabed. Prepare for battle. Enemies are coming. 5 source-type items were lying at the hub of the dimensional rift. However, the aura emitted by these 5 source-type items set off violent dimensional fluctuations at the hub. This dimensional fluctuation was constantly expanding the gate opening that connected to the water world at the hub. Next to the 5 source-type items, there was a ball of light glowing with a colorful luster. It was impossible to see what was inside. The ball of light was covered with a pale yellow transparent shell. The pale yellow transparent shell firmly wrapped the colorful ball of light that one could not see inside. Next to the other 5 source-type items emitting auras at the hub, there were broken fragments of the pale yellow transparent film. Obviously, the surface of these 5 source-type items had also been covered with a layer of pale yellow transparent film. However, it had long been broken by someone. A well-dressed man with a large number of gemstone decorations was standing at the edge of the dimensional rift's hub. This well-dressed man had gray hair, and his face was as pale as white bones. His eyes were also gray and lifeless. However, the occasional glint in his gray eyes made this man not look as dead as he looked. Instead, he was exceptionally dangerous. At that moment, a tall man with short dark green hair lowered his head and walked to the gray-haired man's side. Lord Hunting Ashes, I've sent out the people you designated according to your instructions, but these people you sent out, before the tall, green-haired man could finish his sentence, a voice rang out. The gray-haired man interrupted him impatiently. Just send them out according to my instructions. Have the rest of the people finished the potions I asked you to give them? The man with dark green hair shivered and hurriedly replied, reporting, Lord Hunting Ashes. Reporting to Lord Hunting Ashes, it's all finished. The gray-haired man reached out and touched the black gems that were bigger than pigeon eggs at the waist of his clothes. Then have you also finished the potion? The man with dark green hair gritted his teeth, and cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. He hurriedly took out a bottle from his arms. He raised his head and drank the remaining gray potion at the bottom of the bottle. Seeing this, the gray-haired man stretched out his hand and patted the tall man's face. Then after 10 minutes, bring the rest of the people who drank the potion here. The tall man with dark green hair quickly retreated. His face was ashen as he continued to carry out the orders of the gray-haired man. The gray-haired man stood there for another 5 minutes or so. During these 5 minutes, the gray-haired man had been observing the evolving Class 3-dimensional Rift's hub. A sickly smile appeared on his face. He murmured softly. The dimensional rift's evolution is completely isolated from the outside space. I won't be able to hear Lord 7th Page War's command. The foolish crow is actually dead. Even the 3 King-class combatants that were controlled by Crow's exclusive skill have died. But it doesn't matter. I, Hunting Ashes, will complete the final decree given by Lord 7th Page War. The gray-haired man extended his pale hand and clapped lightly. A gray fly appeared out of thin air not far away. The moment the gray fly appeared, Lin Fan's eyes widened. That space seemed to have lost its shielding, and a pot of golden datura flowers suddenly appeared. Second update, asking for recommendation votes, monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 499. The gray-haired man piously walked to the side of the golden datura flower and knelt on both knees. The flickering light in his gray eyes disappeared, leaving behind only a pious look. Tower Cannon, Tower of War, Team Ash of the Bloodshed Land Division. Hunter Ash bids farewell to Lord 7th Page War. I am willing to offer the lowly life of Hunting Ashes for your orders. At this point, the gray-haired man lowered his head and gently knocked his head in front of the blooming golden datura flower. Then, the gray-haired man stretched out his hand and plucked the blooming golden datura flower from the ground under his feet. She carefully held the golden datura flower that was still dazzling even after leaving the ground. He then tossed the golden datura flower into the Class 3-dimensional rift that was in the process of evolving. Under the energy of the dimensional hub, the golden datura flower was slowly withering. However, the withering golden datura flower released a majestic energy. This boundless energy instantly increased the spatial energy of the dimensional hub by more than 1 level. The dimensional rift, which was already in the process of evolving, was torn open and expanded by more than 3 times. 4 source-type items immediately descended from the dimensional rift that had been split open. However, the withering golden datura flower instantly released more energy when the core of the flower withered. The Water World Dimensional Rift, which had just been promoted to Class 4, immediately began to evolve toward Class 5. At this time, the gray-haired man saw the tall man with dark green hair who had been sent to do the job earlier walking towards him with nearly 50 people. When the gray-haired man saw everyone walking over, he took out a palm-sized golden disc engraved with complex spatial patterns. The disc moved, and a huge purplish-gray egg appeared in the gray-haired man's hand. Everyone stood behind the tall man with a worried expression on their faces. However, the tall man's face was ashen, and his eyes seemed to have lost all signs of life. It was as if he already knew what was about to happen. Among the crowd, a dark-skinned man stepped forward and asked the gray-haired man, "Lord Hunting Ashes, if someone discovers that someone has been sucked into the dimensional rift, it might not necessarily be an unresolvable situation. But you upgraded the dimensional rift. Isn't this the same as locking the dimensional rift? This way, we..." Before the dark-skinned man finished speaking, the gray-haired man raised his head and looked at the dark-skinned man with his gray eyes. The dark-skinned man felt his heart tighten. It was as if his heart was covered with a layer of dust. He felt an indescribable pressure. At this moment, the dark-skinned man heard the gray-haired man ask, "Where else do you want to go if you don't seal this place?" When the dark-skinned man heard this, an unnatural expression flashed across his face. His gaze towards the gray-haired man was far less submissive than the tall man from before. "Of course we are here to complete the mission that Lord Chanter Raven assigned us." When the gray-haired man heard the name Chanter Crow, a trace of disgust flashed across his face. "Crow asked you to maintain the normal operation of the dimensional rift and the concealment of the dimensional rift outside. Have you done it? Now that someone has broken in, you will naturally have to bear the responsibility of guarding this place. As soon as the gray-haired man finished speaking, a dark green-haired woman frowned. Her tone wasn't respectful at all and seemed to be questioning him instead. Lord Hunting Ashes, the Fays that we have contracted are in charge of maintaining the normal operation of the dimensional rift. We aren't adept at combat. We are afraid that something will go wrong and we won't be able to answer to Lord Crow. I wonder where the 3 king-class lords under Lord Crow are now. We need them to stabilize the situation at this time. With the 3 king-class lords around, they are much more useful than us. The dark green-haired woman changed the topic, and her tone was filled with obvious anger. Lord Hunting Ashes, the 30 companions that you have sent out are usually cleaning up. Sending them out to deal with the enemy is just sending them to their deaths. If you do this, who will be responsible for cleaning up here? The gray-haired man looked at everyone's expression. He then turned to look at the tall man with a faint smile and said, "It must be hard on you to work for me normally. It must have been hard on you to work for me. I didn't know that I had lost so much prestige here. If Chanter Crow was still alive, would he dare to speak to me like this right now?" When the tall man heard the gray-haired man's words, especially when he saw the expression on the gray-haired man's face, he felt as though his soul was about to come out of his body. Lord Crow might be a pinnacle suzerain/myth 2 Fey. However, in the Tower of War, he was just a chanter. Lord Hunting Ashes might not be strong, but he belonged to a designated team under the Bloodshed Division. The Ashes team's status in the Tower of War was much higher than that of a chanter. They were even comparable to a lead reader. Every member of the Ash squad had a tumor Fey that could trigger a disaster that Lord 7th Page War had personally stabbed into them. Every Ash team's Lord Hunting Ashes had a destructive strategic significance in a specific battle. However, Lord Hunting Ashes had been too low profile ever since he had arrived here. He had been guarding the dimensional hub. Fortunately, these people didn't know that Lord Crow was already dead. Otherwise, he might not have been able to summon these people even if he used Lord Hunting Ash's name. The tall man was about to say something to control the situation. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his abdomen as though a knife was being twisted, causing him to fall to the ground. At the same time, the tall man's contracted Fey was summoned out uncontrollably. Furthermore, after the tall man's contracted Fey was summoned out, it was as though his spirit had been severely tortured. The tall man closed his eyes in resignation. What was supposed to happen had finally happened. At the same time, the other 50 people who had followed the tall man here were also in the same situation. At that moment, Hunting Ashes was injecting his spiritual power into the purplish-gray egg in his hand. The purplish-gray egg instantly hatched into an elegant, slender, and purplish-gray poisonous wasp. Once this poisonous wasp appeared, it flew in front of each of the spirit chi professionals that had collapsed on the ground under the gray-haired man's command. The wasp's stinger instantly pierced into the back of everyone's head. It was as though something strange had been released from the back of everyone's head. The wasp's stinger instantly pierced into the back of everyone's head. It was as though something strange had been released from the back of everyone's head. First update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 500. Every spirit chi professional that had been released by the purplish-gray elegant venomous wasp became abnormally dull and calm. However, the spirit chi professionals' contracted phase seemed to be enduring some kind of severe mental torture. They began to twitch and struggle violently. Immediately after, the purplish-gray venomous wasp began to stab its stinger into the eyes of every Fey present. Including the tall man, a total of 51 spirit chi professionals and 72 Feys stopped breathing at this moment. Immediately after, a bone-chilling chewing sound came from within these Feys' bodies. Inside each Fey's body, there was a worm of varying sizes that looked as though its entire body was pierced with blades. These worms rapidly gnawed at the Feys that were used as their medium, and their bodies began to grow rapidly. Close to 25 worms' bodies expanded to over 5 meters in size. The blades that grew all over their bodies were abnormally sharp. The remaining 47 had grown to over 3 meters in size. Their bodies were also covered with blades, just like the worms that had grown to over 5 meters in size. However, the sharpness of the blades of these 47 3-meter-long worms was obviously lower than that of the 25 5-meter-long worms. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, everything that was originally present had been nibbled away, leaving only the gray-haired man and the 72 giant worms with sharp horns all over their bodies. The gray-haired man reached out his hand, and the purplish-gray elegant venomous wasp, which was only the size of a goose egg, landed in his hand. It was using its mouth to clean the stinger at the back of its tail. The gray-haired man seemed to be talking to himself. The blade queen bees produced a batch of eggs, but they only have this kind of material. What a waste. However, the combat power of these blade worms is much stronger than that motley crew from before. These 25 diamond blade worms and 47 platinum blade worms should be enough to complete Lord 7th Page War's decree. With that said, the gray-haired man waved his hand and sent out all the blade worms. He then turned and walked to a distant stronghold. There were 7 giant fays that had died long ago in this stronghold. These 7 massive fays, which had long been dead, had obviously been preserved very well. They were a little shriveled, but they had not rotted. The gray-haired man spoke softly to the blade queen bee in his palm. Go and eat these 7 fays. The blade queen bee was clearly resisting, but it still pricked each of the massive dead fays with a needle. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, the blade queen bee began to suck the flesh and blood that had turned into a thick liquid inside the giant fay. The gray-haired man stood at the side with his eyes closed, obviously thinking about something. When he felt the blade queen bee fall into his palm once more, he felt a chill run down his spine. The gray-haired man clenched his fist without hesitation and crushed the blade queen bee in his palm. He muttered softly. I'm sorry, Lord 7th Page War. I killed the blade queen bee that you bestowed on the Ash Squad and entrusted to me for safekeeping. But all of this is to better complete the decree that Lord 7th Page War has given us. As the gray-haired man mumbled, he took out a grayish-purple crystal from the blade empress bee's stomach, which had turned into a pile of minced meat. He took out a grayish-purple crystal from the blade queen bee's stomach, which had turned into meat paste. He repeatedly rubbed his palms against the wall. The blade queen bee ate the 7 dead diamond/fantasy breed fays, and the bee venom crystals in its stomach exploded. It's only equivalent to a full power attack from a diamond V/fantasy breed fay. If these 7 fays didn't die, they would have been eaten alive by the blade queen bee. Then the bee venom crystals in the stomach must be equivalent to a full power attack from a diamond X/fantasy breed fay. After walking out of the stronghold, the gray-haired man gently clapped his hands as though he was summoning a fay. Dying for Lord 7th Page War's law is the best way to die. It's wonderful to be able to see the Class 5-dimensional rift open before I die. I wonder if another sacred source lifeform descends after the Class 5-dimensional rift opens, along with the sacred source lifeform at the dimensional hub that has yet to break the protective barrier. Will it allow the Class 5-dimensional rift to evolve again? At this moment, a gray fly flapped its wings and made a buzzing sound. It flew close and landed on the gray-haired man's shoulder. After the gray fly landed on the gray-haired man's body, his entire body became illusory. The gray-haired man's aura was completely restrained. Even his body was only an illusory shadow when he moved. Upon hearing that an enemy was coming, Lu Jie and Zhou Luo immediately entered combat mode. Immediately after, Lin Yuan said, "That's right. Brother Lu, my source sand can only sense the approximate number of enemies, but it can't completely sense their strength. I'll create a quicksand vortex 1/2 meter in diameter on the seabed and release 2 hurricane owlet moths and 10 flesh-mincing blade insects. You can use these insects to probe the strength of the person coming." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jie immediately commanded the insect queen to attach its will to the 10 flesh-mincing blade insects and hurricane owlet moths that Lin Yuan had released. He then looked at the enemy target. With this look, Lu Jie's face immediately revealed a look of surprise. Lu Jie was not surprised that the person coming was powerful, but he was surprised that the person coming was a little too weak. There were a total of 30 spirit chi professionals coming. The 30 spirit chi professionals rode on the diamond giant cattle together. Then, nearly 40 fays of all kinds followed the giant cattle and were rushing over. The combination of these 30 spirit chi professionals and fays was not so much like an oncoming enemy. It was more like the logistics team of the Architects Association. Although a large portion of these fays were not produced in the Radiance Federation, there were still a small portion of them. Most of these fays were not produced in the Radiance Federation. Most of these fays were not good at combat. For example, those diamond giant cattle were the most popular fays in the Architects Association. The stone that a diamond giant cattle could transport could speed up the construction period of the architect team by nearly 1/3. Lu Jie had never imagined that he would face such an enemy. The giant cattle, including the over 40 fays behind them, were all diamond fays. A few of them were diamond fays. However, even if Lin Yuan did not replenish Lu Jie's depleted spiritual power and multiply the insect swarm, just by relying on his usual combat ability, Lu Jie was confident that he could defeat such an enemy. Second chapter, requesting recommendation votes and monthly votes. This book was written to the 500th chapter, which was considered a threshold. Book friends who want to see this chapter, leave a comment. Say your opinion or blessings about this book. Hee hee. Love you, moi. End of this chapter. Chapter 501. Although the spiritual power in his body had been restored by Lin Yuan, it was not enough to rely on the protein silkworm chrysalis alone. The insect queen's energy to synthesize insect proteins could not be obtained by just relying on the protein silkworm chrysalis. It also needed some nutrients that could only be obtained from meat, blood, and even bones. Lin Yuan was going to continue to inject more spiritual power into his body. However, because the insect queen's body lacked a lot of energy components that could not be obtained from the protein silkworm chrysalis, it had to stop the production of insect species phase. These huge diamond giant cattle and a group of non-combat class high-grade fays were just enough for the insect queen to control the insect swarm to have a good meal. However, Lu Jie suddenly came to a realization, and his brows furrowed. According to the 400 simplified hurricane owlet moths that he had sent out earlier, it seemed that the oncoming enemy was the weakest among the fays that he had detected. There was only one possibility for such an enemy to appear: they wanted to stall for time. The enemy would send these logistics personnel to fight, which was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. This behavior was enough to show that the enemy had the determination to cut off all means of retreat. Lin Yuan saw the expression on Lu Jie's face change again and quickly asked, "Big brother Lu, what's the situation?" Lu Jie hurriedly told Lin Yuan and Zhou Luo what he had seen. Lu Jie hurriedly told Lin Yuan and Zhou Luo what he had seen. Then, Lu Jie also shared his thoughts. "I plan to use this batch of enemies' contracted phase as the insect queen's nutrient base to provide nutrients for the insect queen to continue producing insect swarms. Otherwise, without enough high-grade fey flesh, the insect swarm produced by the insect queen won't be able to reach the standard in shell strength." As he spoke, Lu Jie scratched his head with some embarrassment. Lu Jie felt that he had been negligent and had not expected such a situation to occur on this trip to Indigo Azure City. Under normal circumstances, Lu Jie would prepare the protein silkworm chrysalis in the diamond phase storage box to help the insect queen recover insect proteins. He would also prepare some high-grade fey flesh. Although this time was no exception, the high-grade dimensional lifeform's flesh was still a little insufficient for the production of so many insect swarms. This lesson made Lu Jie understand that in the future, his reserves of protein silkworm chrysalis and high-grade fey flesh in the diamond phase storage box would increase by at least 5 times or even 10 times. Only then would he be able to face all kinds of dangerous situations. The current situation of insufficient high-grade fey flesh would never happen again. The main reason for this was that Lu Jie had not expected Lin Yuan to have such a powerful spiritual power recovery ability. After listening to Lu Jie's words, Lin Yuan replied, Brother Lu, let me handle this wave of enemies. You just have to be in charge of letting the insect swarm eat the fays that have sunk into the sea of sand and recover their energy. While speaking, Lin Yuan carefully sensed the spiritual power reserves in his body. There was still 1/3 of the spiritual power in the spirit chi imprint that had not been consumed. Although there was only 1/3 of the spiritual power left in the spiritual force imprint, the spiritual power accumulated by the Bronze X/Legend spirit drawing ichthyosaur over a long period of time was still a massive amount. Lin Yuan's decision to take on such a wave of enemies alone was to preserve Lu Jie's strength to the greatest extent. At the same time, it was also because the Bronze X/Fantasy Eye source sand had absorbed a portion of the mountain-containing embryo. It had officially advanced from Fantasy Eye to Fantasy 2. The source sand had formed a Gold Eye/Fantasy 2 elemental source-type life form. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lu Jie immediately controlled a portion of the flesh-mincing blade insects that had been produced in the flows and when the insect queen's nutrients were insufficient in the later stages. They were ready to start a bloody feast. The lava dragon lizard ran extremely fast, and the enemies on the opposite side were also flying over. In a short while, Lin Yuan saw the oncoming enemies with his naked eye. When he took a closer look at the appearance of the spirit chi professional on the back of the diamond giant cattle running toward him, his pupils immediately constricted. Many of them looked very similar to the spirit chi professionals who had ambushed him in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. Different places nurtured different people, and the appearances of the spirit chi professionals on different continents were also different. It was obvious from their appearances that they were not from the Radiance Federation. It was very likely that they were from the Dark Continent, like the spirit chi professional who had ambushed him previously. He used Morbius True Data to scan the large group of fays that were coming at him. Then, he closed his eyes and used his spiritual energy to communicate with the source sand. After Lin Yuan communicated with the source sand, he immediately heard the boiling sound of the sea of sand under the seabed. At that moment, the spirit chi professionals riding on the backs of the diamond giant cattle also discovered the existence of Lin Yuan and the others. Although the large group of fays on the opposite side were not good at fighting, they still had a certain killing power after reaching platinum or diamond. Many long-range attacks were released by these fays toward the lava dragon lizard. Zhou Luo, who was riding the lava dragon lizard, shouted, "Lava dragon lizard, use lava shield." Immediately after, a spherical shield wrapped around the surface of the lava dragon lizard's body. It firmly protected the lava dragon lizard, Zhou Luo, Lin Yuan, and Lu Jie inside the shield. All kinds of attacks landed on the lava shield. Some splashed ripples, while some dissipated without even splashing. This wave of attacks could be said to have been blocked by Zhou Luo. After the lava dragon lizard awakened its dragon species bloodline and mutated to grow 2 heads, it was no longer the same as before. The strength of a diamond/fantasy breed was superior to an ordinary diamond fey by an entire grade. Zhou Luo's existence had always been extremely low, but this time, Zhou Luo directly displayed his king-class strength. At the same time, the seabed within a 2-kilometer radius instantly turned into a boiling quicksand vortex. The opposing fays were all running on land. As non-combat fays, these terrestrial fays were not mobile in the first place. This caused many platinum fays to be pulled into the sea of sand by the gold/fantasy breed source sand, and they kept sinking. Without Lin Yuan doing anything, these sinking fays were eaten alive by the flesh-mincing blade insects that Lu Jie had instructed to lurk on standby. Not even a trace of blood or bones was wasted. Compared to the fay's flesh, the nutrients contained in the fay's blood and bones were more needed by the insect queen. The few diamond giant cattle struggled violently in the sea of sand. I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Sob, sob, sob. End of this chapter. Chapter 502. When a fay's mobility was strong enough, it could run to its heart's content even in the boiling quicksand. It was just that the giant cattle was too cumbersome, and it could only ensure that its head would not sink into the quicksand when it struggled. Its body had already sunk into the quicksand except for a little place on its back. But even so, no matter how Lin Yuan made the source sand drag the giant cattle down, it could still rely on its own strength to move in the quicksand. However, the giant cattle's movement speed could really be described as an old cow pulling a cart. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan let the source sand use its exclusive skill, Gravel Spirit Acceptance, which was equivalent to the Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line, to kill the diamond giant cattle. But at that moment, Lin Yuan helplessly discovered something. Even if the source sand's Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line could pierce into the giant cattle's body, it could only penetrate half a meter of flesh. This was not enough to cause fatal harm to the 15-meter-long giant cattle. After some pretense, Lin Yuan finally understood the bitterness of mosquitoes in the summer. Some people with thick hair or rough skin were simply a nightmarish blow to hungry mosquitoes. After working hard for a night, not only did it not suck any blood, but the blood-sucking needle was blocked by the dandruff. However, Lin Yuan did not believe it and continued to command the heart-penetrating iron line to attack the giant cattle's 3 vulnerable parts. However, the giant cattle actually clamped its tail tightly between its legs, completely protecting its vulnerable parts. Lin Yuan curled his lips and took out a few heart-penetrating iron line that were much stronger than Platinum 3/Elite from his leaf-shaped diamond face storage box. After a simple test, Lin Yuan replaced the Gravel Spirit Acceptance's Platinum 3/Elite Heart-Penetrating Iron Line with a Platinum V/Flawless Heart-Penetrating Iron Line. This time, the needle in the mosquito's mouth was directly upgraded, even though it had only increased by 2 small grades. However, its quality had also improved by a level. The Platinum V/Flawless Heart-Penetrating Iron Line could already enter the giant cattle's body. It swam in the giant cattle's body and used the heart-penetrating iron line's old skill to penetrate the giant cattle's heart. For a moment, each of the giant cattle seemed to be suffering great pain from the front and the back of their feet. After each of the giant cattle let out a final cry, they stopped struggling. Even the spirit chi professional on the back of the diamond giant cattle sank into the quicksand vortex. This scene horrified Lu Jia and Zhou Luo. Lin Yuan's sea of sand was not as simple as it looked on the surface. There was obviously another world in the depths of the sea of sand. It was as if a demon with a sickle was hiding in the dark, ready to harvest the creatures in the sea of sand at any time. Lu Jia and Zhou Luo had seen Lin Yuan throwing the heart-penetrating iron line into the sea of sand. The demon in the deep sea should be related to the dead heart-penetrating iron line that Lin Yuan had thrown into the sea of sand. He just didn't know what the specific connection was. Then, Zhou Luo and Lu Jia saw Lin Yuan take out a large number of bronze ferromanganese and 1 cubic meter of gold day and night spirit silver from the phase storage box. Lin Yuan threw the ferromanganese and the day and night spirit silver into the quicksand vortex formed by the source sand. The source sand had upgraded from Fantasy I to Fantasy II, and all its exclusive skills had been enhanced. Apart from the Gravel Spirit Acceptance, which could accept stronger creatures, even the exclusive skill, Metal Consume Manifestation, could also swallow more metals. Its changed form had also become more refined. The source sand had only absorbed about half of the mountain-containing embryo. The remaining half was still holding the Earth Elemental Heavenly Maiden-grade elemental pearls produced by the thick Earth Elemental shellfish and fiddled with them like an old man. After absorbing the mountain-containing embryo's transformation ability, the source sand had produced 3 more layers of close guard sand than before. The increase in close guard sand was equivalent to Lin Yuan's defensive ability once again. Lu Jia let the flesh-mincing blade insects gnaw on the diamond giant cattle that had just died. At the same time, he urged the insect queen to use its exclusive skill, Blast Recovery, to explode the flesh-mincing blade insects that had devoured a large amount of flesh and bones to recover energy. The inside of the boiling sea of sand that Lin Yuan was urging was like a continuous series of farts. The puff, puff, puff sounds were continuous. Lin Yuan had always felt that his contracted red thorn was very bad for the child ramets and ramets it produced. However, after seeing Lu Jia's insect queen's method of producing insects, Lin Yuan felt that red thorn was really a warm and cute plant. Of course, the most important thing was red thorn's damn gentleness toward the child ramets and cluster plants. Of course, the most important thing was red thorn's damn gentleness toward the child ramets and cluster plants. In fact, Lin Yuan did not consume much spiritual power in his body when he urged the flow Zan to attack on a large scale this time. A large amount of gravel had been produced on the seabed. To a large extent, this large-scale quicksand was the source sand's instinctive behavior as an elemental source-type life form. The true consumption of spiritual power was to let the source sand use its exclusive skill to drive the heart-penetrating iron line to kill the diamond giant cattle. In a short while, a small quicksand vortex appeared under the lava dragon lizard's feet. The quicksand vortex spat out a few clear golden discs. Lin Yuan's eyes immediately lit up, and he jumped off the lava dragon lizard's back. He held these 30 clear golden metal discs in his hand and examined them one by one. After the examination, Lin Yuan found that these clear golden metal discs were almost identical to the one he had obtained before. However, the difference was that there was more or less a slight difference in the size of the space inside the discs. Lin Yuan was overjoyed. He was several times happier to obtain these clear golden metal discs than to obtain some precious spiritual ingredients. As more and more large spirit consumers appeared in Lin Yuan's spirit lock spatial zone, the energy ores stored in the original clear golden disc were also consumed faster and faster. Especially now that a total of 7 bronze/legend elemental shellfish were constantly producing elemental pearls, the spirit chi consumption had increased exponentially. This made Lin Yuan need to replenish the energy ores in the clear golden disc every short period of time. But now, with these 30 clear golden metal discs, Lin Yuan could finally replenish them. Lin Yuan could finally reduce a lot of trivial troubles. Even if Morbius Spirit Lock Spatial Zone advanced or too many large spirit consumers joined in, Lin Yuan could completely cope with it. At the same time, Lin Yuan could not help but think that since the enemy's suicide squad had the clear golden metal discs, then the others must have them too. Just as Lin Yuan was thinking about these clear golden metal discs, a violent spatial fluctuation suddenly came from a distance. Second update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 503. Lin Yuan's, Lu Jie's, and Zhou Luo's expressions changed. The problem that they had been most worried about had actually happened. The fact that they could feel such a strong spatial fluctuation from so far away meant that the evolving Class 3 Water World Dimensional Rift had, for some reason, reached Class 4. It had even started to evolve from Class 4 to Class 5. The current situation was so severe that they had to race against time to take out the source-type item inside the dimensional hub. A normal dimensional rift's evolution would take around 12 hours. Therefore, Lin Yuan, Lu Jie, and Zhou Luo had always had time to plan and prepare. However, due to the influence of external factors, the dimensional rift had suddenly advanced by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, violent spatial fluctuations were constantly coming from not far away. This situation meant that the dimensional rift's evolution from Class 4 to Class 5 could be completed at any time. Lin Yuan knew that the mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen would definitely find out and be vigilant after they were sucked into the dimensional rift. However, no matter what kind of preparations they made, if the Class 5 dimensional rift really opened in the coastal sea so close to Indigo Azure City, then the entire city was destined to become underwater ruins. Just as Lin Yuan's and Lu Jie's expressions were getting darker, Zhou Luo also looked up into the distance. Then he turned to look at Lu Jie and immediately took a deep look at Lin Yuan. The faintly determined look between his eyebrows was even stronger, as if at this moment, Zhou Luo had deepened the decision he had made in his heart. Lin Yuan took a deep breath, which only stopped when his entire lungs swelled and ached. Then, he exhaled all at once, forcefully suppressing the rising sense of urgency in his heart, and calmly looked at Lu Jie and Zhou Luo. We'll rush directly toward the location of the dimensional hub. No matter what, we must stop the dimensional rift's evolution. Just as Lin Yuan's voice fell, Zhou Luo shouted before Lu Jia could speak. Okay. This word seemed to shout out all of Zhou Luo's courage. Zhou Luo did not understand why the blood in his heart was actually surging at this time. Zhou Luo could not tell if the passion in his heart was because this was Lin Yuan's idea. As a servant, he had to obey Lin Yuan's orders in order to repay Lin Yuan's kindness in giving him a new lease of life. Or was it because he simply saw the resolute light in the eyes of Lin Yuan and Lu Jia, the two Federation prodigies? Lu Jia didn't say anything. He just quickly manipulated the swarm of insects in the sea of sand under the seabed to gnaw on the dead diamond giant cattle with all their might. Lu Jia knew that there was a tough battle ahead. In such a dangerous situation, replenishing the energy within the insect queen's body was a huge luxury. Lu Jia raised his head and said, I left about 500 flesh-mincing blade insects here, and they can completely eat the phase under the sea of sand. It will still take some time for these diamond giant cattle to completely eat up the phase under the sea of sand. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan no longer hid the large amount of yellow sand that the source sand had produced under the seabed. Lin Yuan did not inject spiritual power into the source sand. It was only because the source sand had sensed Lin Yuan's command that it used its own body to move the entire sea of gravel. As far as the eye could see, the surroundings instantly turned into a world of gravel. Before Zhou Luo and Lu Jia had time to be shocked, everyone had once again boarded the lava dragon lizard's back. The rolling sand pushed the lava dragon lizard forward. Although it was not obvious, it actually increased the lava dragon lizard's running speed. At the same time, in the shallow coastal sea outside Indigo Azure City, outside the evolving dimensional rift, a woman dressed in a moon-colored robe with a half-murderous and half-worried expression on her face was bathed in the blood-stained moonlight. Bathing in the blood-stained moonlight, his powerful aura seeped out of his body without concealment. This woman in the moon-colored robe was the Moon Empress, who had arrived a few hours ago. The rich moonlight pulled open a curtain behind the Moon Empress. Inside the curtain were only the Moon Empress, Mystic Moon, and the dimensional rift entrance that had been sealed. Outside the curtain stood the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. The Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen were also shrouded in the rich moonlight. The moonlight covered the figures of the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. Behind the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen stood an unknown number of experts in or near Indigo Azure City who had rushed over after learning of the Moon Empress' arrival. A large portion of these experts were creation masters. However, most of these experts had their bodies bowed and their eyes looking straight at the ground. It was as though raising their eyes was a kind of overstepping their authority. This included the two guard envoys who stood 5 positions behind the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and Listen. Mystic Moon, who was behind the moonlight curtain, looked at the Moon Empress' expression and understood even more how important Lin Yuan was to the Moon Empress. He had followed the Moon Empress for so many years, but he had never seen such a worried expression on her face. Furthermore, this worried expression had been hanging on the Moon Empress' face for a few hours. Mystic Moon lowered his head and glanced at the captivating red ethereal jellyfish in the Moon Empress' arms. Then, he looked at the little rabbit beside the Moon Empress' feet. Its ears drooped and it looked listless, as though it had lost its favor. Mystic Moon understood the worry in the Moon Empress' heart even more. It was not as simple as what she showed on her face. However, at this time, as one of the Moon Empress' 2 moon envoys, Mystic Moon still had to handle the matters that needed to be handled. Suddenly, Mystic Moon thought of something and whispered to the Moon Empress. Moon Empress, on Cold Moon's side, should we? Mystic Moon did not finish his sentence, but the Moon Empress understood the meaning behind his words. The Moon Empress frowned and pondered for 3 seconds before replying, yes. Yes. The Moon Empress naturally knew that when Mystic Moon mentioned Cold Moon, he was actually referring to Chu Ci. The Moon Empress was very clear about the relationship between Lin Yuan and Chu Ci. At this time, Lin Yuan could be said to be at a life and death juncture. The Moon Empress put herself in his shoes and felt that Chu Xi needed to know. After all, she was Lin Yuan's master. If she did not know at this time, it would be absolutely unacceptable for her. In the world, it was better to have less trouble than more trouble. In the face of true family love, smooth worldly wisdom seemed more like fallacies. Moreover, it was not just Chu Xi. Cold Moon was one of the 2 moon envoys. At this time, Cold Moon should also be standing here waiting for the Radiant Moon Palace's young lord. Return. First update, seeking recommendation votes, monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 504. Mystic Moon turned around and walked out of the curtain formed by the moonlight. At the same time, she was thinking about how to speak to Cold Moon. The feeling of conveying bad news was too heart-wrenching. The moment Mystic Moon walked out of the moonlight curtain, the mother of Bloodbath immediately stepped forward and hurriedly asked, Lin Yuan, Lin Yuan. Before the mother of Bloodbath could finish speaking, Mystic Moon raised her eyes and glanced at the mother of Bloodbath. You didn't take up the responsibility of a path protector and betrayed the Moon Empress trust. Mystic Moon's words were like a sword that stabbed directly into the mother of Bloodbath's spider heart. The mother of Bloodbath's face was originally filled with worry, but after Mystic Moon's words, it immediately turned as pale as a piece of white cardboard. Mystic Moon didn't care about the mother of Bloodbath's reaction, but when she passed by it, she said, You also betrayed Lin Yuan's trust. You also betrayed Lin Yuan's trust. If Xian Yu's previous words were like a sword, then Xian Yu's words were like a sword. Now, Mystic Moon's words were treating the mother of Bloodbath's spider heart as if it were a cake, repeatedly hammering it with a big hammer. Endless Summer hurriedly reached out and grabbed the mother of Bloodbath, giving it some strength. After listening to Mystic Moon's words, Endless Summer had the same feeling as the mother of Bloodbath. It could be considered as empathizing. Although Endless Summer wasn't Lin Yuan's path protector, as a guardian, it also had the responsibility to protect Lin Yuan's safety. While Xian Yu's words were directed at the mother of Bloodbath, they were also directed at herself. When Mystic Moon's figure appeared through the dense moonlight, a few of the experts who were bowing slightly raised their heads. The 2 guard envoys standing at the forefront hurriedly stepped forward and asked, Lady Mystic Moon, what are the Moon Empress arrangements here? The 2 guard envoys were very anxious. The 2 of them had come to Indigo Azure City for a mission, but there were simply too many twists and turns. Previously, because of the energy fluctuations from the experts' battle, they had come to this deserted island to investigate and had unexpectedly encountered the Moon Empress' brilliant disciple. Now, the Moon Empress had personally come to this deserted island. Thinking about it, something must have happened to the little ancestor that the 2 of them had met earlier, who had called them seniors and made their teeth ache. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have left in such a hurry. Instead, they would have stayed on this deserted island. Now, a controlled Class 3 water world dimensional rift had unexpectedly appeared in the sea region so close to Indigo Azure City. Most importantly, this controlled Class 3 water world dimensional rift was still evolving. This was a huge matter. Even though the 2 guard envoys were used to great storms and waves, they did not know what to do at this moment. Duan He, who was standing quite a distance behind the 2 guard envoys, secretly raised his head. However, Duan He didn't look straight ahead. Instead, he looked to his left and right. Duan He could not help but sigh inwardly. How many Class 4 creation masters are standing beside me? I'm afraid that all the nearby Class 4 creation masters that can rush over are already here. Even if the Indigo Azure City's Creation Master Association had a major event, it wouldn't be possible to see so many Class 4 creation masters gathered in one place. Duan He sneakily raised his head and looked forward. However, with just a single glance, Duan He felt that the 3 figures in the distant dense moonlight were vaguely familiar. Due to being covered by the dense moonlight, Duan He couldn't think of anything for a moment. At that moment, Duan He heard a clear, cold, and pleasing voice. This cold voice was like a frozen osmanthus branch that had fallen to the ground, and it had an indescribable solemnity. It was as though she was conveying an order that no one could defy. Mystic Moon, go and inform the Imperial Court that this dimensional rift has to be arranged and prepared in advance according to the standards of Class 5 and above dimensional rifts. The Moon Empress' voice was like a cold star descending from the sky, causing everyone's heart to skip a beat. At the same time, a horrified expression arose on their faces. Did the Moon Empress just say a dimensional rift that was Class 5 and above? This kind of dimensional rift had never been heard of before. At that moment, the two guard envoys' foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. They were worried about the dimensional rift that the Moon Empress had mentioned. They didn't expect that the Moon Empress would actually call out their names. Guard envoys of the Spirit Guards, go and ask the Chief Guard of the Spirit Guards, Night Leaning Moon, to personally come and oversee things. The lava dragon lizard sped across the sea of sand. A minute ago, Lin Yuan had already sensed something rushing toward them from the sea of sand made of endless gravel in the distance. Lin Yuan said to Lu Jia in a deep voice, "Big brother Lu, don't hold back in the battle later. Big brother Lu, don't hold back when we fight later. Let's finish this quickly." Lu Jia immediately responded. "Okay, I'll let the lightning-gathering moths use the lightning beams that I've condensed in advance to launch a long-range attack." The lightning-gathering moths that had absorbed the plasma caterpillar's plasma energy could be considered the strongest attack among the sea of insects that Lu Jia controlled. Originally, Lu Jia and Lin Yuan had planned to use these lightning-gathering moths, which had absorbed the plasma energy from the plasma caterpillars, as a trump card for sneak attacks. However, in this race against time, using one's brain to fight was no longer advisable. They could only rush forward and rush all the way to the dimensional hub. Based on the situation in the sea of sand, Lin Yuan knew that the incoming enemy was indeed tough. This was because the incoming phase were extremely mobile. Even on the sea of sand full of quicksand vortexes, the source sand kept pulling them down. These phase could still rely on their extremely strong mobility and would not be too affected in the process of advancing. The lava dragon lizard's speed did not slow down because it was going to engage in close combat with the enemy. Soon, after seeing the opposite situation, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly constricted. Lin Yuan could only see that each of the phase that were running toward him was a huge, strange object that seemed to have blades in its body. Lin Yuan immediately used true data to examine the largest strange object at the front, which seemed to have blades inserted into its body. Fey name, blade worm, blade queen bee larva, Fey species, arthropodidae/vermiform, Fey grade, diamond, 7/10, Fey type, metal, Fey quality, flawless with one look. Lin Yuan knew what these strange creatures with blade-like blades in their bodies were. They were actually larvae hatched from the blade queen bee's eggs. However, the bodies of these blade worms were too short. They were like fat sea cucumbers. Instead of calling them blade worms, it would be better to call them fat sea cucumbers. The second one was even better. The third one had been restored. End of this chapter. Chapter 505. However, Lin Yuan did not dare to underestimate these blade worms that looked like fat sea cucumbers. The blade queen bee was a carcinoma Fey that was recorded by the spirit guards. The blade queen bee was considered one of the most destructive carcinoma Feys in the spirit guards' records. It was not that the blade queen bee was strong in single combat. On the contrary, the blade queen bee did not have much combat power. In order to successfully lay eggs, the blade queen bee produced a terrifying mental toxin and a sharp stinger that had a strong penetrating effect. Although the blade queen bee did not have much combat power, the blade worms that the blade queen bee gave birth to were war machines that excelled in killing. The blade queen bee relied on pure physical strength to fight and kill. Therefore, Lin Yuan could only fight head-on. However, Lin Yuan felt extremely fortunate to be able to fight head-on. The current situation could be said to be extremely good news. This was the Water World Dimensional Rift, and the blade queen bee would require a sufficient number of fresh phase to produce blade worms. After the blade queen bee produced the blade worm's eggs, the mental toxin that the blade queen bee injected into the target's body would fuse with the mental toxin on the blade worm's eggshell. It would immediately transform into a mental toxin that would take the target's life in an instant. This could also be considered a protective mechanism. After the death of the host, the blade worm's eggshell would break. The newly hatched blade worms would eat the target's brain. The reason why the blade worms would first eat the target's brain was because of the two mental toxins. Even if the host died, the memories in the brain would be completely preserved. The hatched blade worm larvae would steal the previous host's combat experience and techniques. As a result, every blade worm would turn into a war machine that excelled in combat the moment it matured. This was also why the logistics phase that had come to die previously were not transformed into blade worms. After eating the brain, the newly hatched blade worm would drill through the target's body and breathe its first breath of air. Then, it would devour the host's internal organs, flesh, and bones. After the blade worm broke out of its shell and absorbed all the energy in its host's body. After growing up, their level and quality would become the same as the host's level and quality. As for the high-grade water world dimensional lifeforms in the water world dimensional rift, they would instantly decay upon death. He didn't give the blade worms any time to feast on them. That was probably why there weren't many blade worms in front of him. As long as there was enough energy, the blade queen bee could produce a batch of eggs within its body in about 48 hours. The blade queen bee's production speed was considered slow among the carcinoma phase. However, it was still dozens or even hundreds of times superior to ordinary phase. The current environment did not have enough material for the blade queen bee to lay eggs. Otherwise, if there were enough materials, they would have no chance of winning at all. Lin Yuan used true data to check the number and grade of the blade worms. After reading it, Lin Yuan shouted, "Come on, 25 diamond blade worms and 47 platinum blade worms. Big Brother Lu, let the charged lightning gathering moths ignore the diamond blade worms. Let's kill the 47 platinum blade worms first." When Lu Jia heard Lin Yuan say there were 25 diamond blade worms, he immediately stopped counting the insect swarm's energy consumption. He immediately stopped calculating the insect swarm's consumption and summoned 300 lightning gathering moths that had been charged in advance from the quicksand vortex that Lin Yuan had opened up. Lu Jia immediately commanded the 100 lightning gathering moths to absorb a large amount of plasma caterpillar's plasma and form a lightning beam. From high up in the sky, they shot toward the 47 platinum blade worms that were running behind the 25 diamond blade worms. 100 dazzling bluish-purple lightning bolts let out a thunderous roar. The 100 bolts of purplish-blue lightning struck the bodies of the 47 platinum blade worms, electrocuting the sand beneath their feet into a viscous, mud-like liquid. Lu Jia, Lin Yuan, and Zhou Luo held their breaths as they watched the lightning feast. However, when the lightning dissipated, it was discovered that the 100 lightning gathering moths had only managed to kill one platinum blade worm. Although there were still 7 or 8 platinum blade worms lying on the ground, the lightning beams had left a few large holes on their bodies. But very quickly, the holes on the blade worms' bodies began to sprout sharp keratin that looked like sharp blades. The gap on the blade worm's body was completely sealed. Through true data, Lin Yuan found that the platinum 9 blade worm on the ground had dropped to platinum 4 after its injuries had been healed with the blade keratin that it had grown. Although the blade worm's levels had dropped after recovering, the keratin that had been used to mend their wounds still looked exceptionally ferocious. Lu Jia said in a low voice as he looked ahead at the blade worms that were charging at him after they recovered. "I intend to use Battle Plan 4. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately responded. "You take the lead. I'll let the source sand support you." Lin Yuan injected spiritual power into the sea of sand that the source sand had created. As the sea of sand boiled, 150 shield ladybugs crawled out of it. The 50 shield ladybugs formed a layer, and there were 3 layers in total, blocking the lava dragon lizard. After the shield ladybugs were summoned, Zhou Luo started to cast lava shield on the first row of shield ladybugs one by one. This time, Lu Jie did not let the remaining 200 lightning-gathering moths continue to shoot lightning beams at the platinum blade worms. Instead, the 200 charged lightning-gathering moths and the 100 lightning-gathering moths that had finished firing their lightning-gathering beams flew straight at the remaining 46 platinum blade worms that were charging at them. When the 200 charged lightning-gathering moths got close, they shot out the lightning beams from their bodies. Just as the lightning beam was about to land on the platinum blade worm, the blade worm's body trembled. Insect Queen, use Blast Recovery. Insect Queen, use Blast Recovery. The sound of plasma crackling, mixed with the roar of 300 lightning-gathering moths self-destructing, exploded in the midst of the 46 platinum blade worms. First update. Hehe, I'm synchronized to the starting point. Happy. End of this chapter. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.